Greetings, traveller of time. This is an old historian speaking, a keeper of secrets from the Middle Ages. If you relax or drift off to sleep while listening, then I've already fulfilled my purpose. But first, tell me, where are you listening from? Maybe from the comfort of your bed, maybe from some faraway corner of the world, or maybe in the stillness of a midnight hour when sleep refuses to come. Picture yourself, just for a moment, sitting before an ancient fireplace, the flames crackling softly, and imagine that the words you'll hear tonight are not just history, but a quiet companion for your evening. The medieval night settles slowly, like a heavy woolen cloak draped across thatched rooftops. The wind seeps through wooden cracks, brushing against your face like an icy caress. You can sense the smell of freshly burned firewood mingling with the earthy aroma of rye bread resting on a simple table. In the distance, a dog barks, breaking the monotony of a village already tucked in for the night. Life back then moved to a rhythm unlike ours. Once the sun sank, darkness reigned, and nearly everything came to rest, except for the taverns, which kept their pulse alive behind closed doors. The stars gleam brighter than we're used to, with no artificial lights to challenge their glow. Each spark above was a sign to those who believed the heavens carried messages about fate. The ground beneath is cold, the soil marked by footprints left from the day, now resting in silence. You'd feel the roughness of each stone, the hardness of the earth, and the cool dampness rising with the night's dew. You could almost hear the creak of the tavern's timbers, softly inviting you inside. Behind those oak doors, bound with iron hinges, life stirs. Golden torchlight and flickering tallow candles slip through narrow cracks, casting trembling shadows onto the empty street. Within, voices rise and blend in laughter and song, punctuated by the clinking of wooden mugs brimming with mead. The warmth inside stands in sharp contrast to the cutting cold outside, as if two separate worlds existed side by side, the dark, silent night and the lively, glowing hall. This dance between shadow and flame, silence and song, shaped the very heart of medieval evenings. But don't think taverns were just places of merriment. They were crossroads of stories, where news flowed like hidden streams beneath the earth. Peasants would hear whispers of distant wars, knights traded tales of their journeys, and merchants displayed spices from lands so far that they felt like another world. In many ways, taverns were the social networks of the Middle Ages, where spoken words carried the weight that books, newspapers, or screens do today. Every word mattered. Every tale could shift a decision or awaken new hope in weary souls. Now imagine the gentlest sound, the soft strumming of a lute played by a troubadour seated on a rough-hewn bench. The strings hum and linger in the air with long, hypnotic notes. His voice carries not just for amusement, but to preserve memory itself. Troubadours kept alive the deeds of knights, the sagas of battles, and even tender stories of love and loss. In this way, the past was never lost, but woven into the present like strands of wool in a loom. A careful ear might catch a missed note here and there, but everything still sounded enchanting. The warmth inside the tavern wraps around you. Your hands might trace the grain of an old table, worn smooth by countless elbows, resting there through the years. You'd feel the ridges carved into its surface, silent witnesses of generations long gone. In the air lingers the sweet scent of mead, a honey-based drink beloved across northern Europe. It wasn't only a comfort, but often seen as a remedy, thought to soothe aches and heal small wounds. Drinking was both joy and medicine, a ritual that gave meaning to gathering under flickering light. And yet, beyond those walls, life felt utterly different. Silence stretched through the village, broken only by distant whispers. The rustle of branches swaying in the wind, the restless lowing of cattle, or the steady breath of sleeping villagers. Many believed that night belonged to unseen forces, which is why the light of company felt like protection. To step into a tavern was, in a sense, to defy the darkness and prove that human warmth could triumph over fear. Still, there was always something more, something hidden behind those doors. While music drifted and mugs were raised, someone always kept a secret close to the chest. And that's the secret I wish to guide you toward, slowly, like opening an ancient chest and uncovering a forgotten relic. Don't rush. Night is long, and each detail will fall into place like mosaic tiles that only reveal their meaning when seen as a whole. For now, just let yourself rest by this imagined hearth. And so, traveler, the journey has only begun. There's still so much left to unfold, stories woven together like invisible threads within these medieval tavern walls. Here, between the crackle of firewood and the quiet murmur of voices, lie secrets carried through the centuries. What's ahead won't reveal itself all at once. You'll need to listen slowly, the way you savor the aroma of bread before taking a bite. Close your eyes if you wish, and let the atmosphere surround you. The first invitation has been given, and the night still holds so much more. The smoke from the hearth drifts upward in lazy spirals, clinging to the dark beams that hold up the ceiling. You could almost smell the heavy mix of soot and burnt fat, traces of a life simple and unhurried, yet that same smoke also served a purpose, keeping insects at bay and clearing the air of its heaviness. On the tavern ceilings, those dark stains stood as silent witnesses to years of whispered tales and sung ballads, to long nights where time itself seemed to stretch at the mercy of the fire. In the background, there's the muffled sound of dice tumbling across a table. Some men laugh loudly, while others frown at their bad luck. Gambling was common, though not always welcomed by the church. It offered an escape from the grind of daily life, a brief moment to dream of sudden fortune. But more than coins, what truly passed around the tables was the illusion that fate could change in a heartbeat, with nothing more than the roll of a carved wooden cube. The tavern keeper, a stout man with a thick beard, moves with steady steps between the tables. His apron is blotched with wine and grease, yet his sharp eyes miss nothing, recording every movement in the room. He knows them all, who pays, who owes, who talks too much. In medieval life, he was respected as much as feared, for he held the secrets of many. In his own way, he was a living chronicler of the village, carrying stories that would never be written down, but lived on in his memory. Your hand might feel the rough surface of a wooden mug, damp from drink. The liquid dripping across your fingers would leave a sticky trace, quickly forgotten once warmth spread down your throat. The taste was bold, sweet, and slightly sour, typical of brews left to ferment in handmade barrels. The body heated from within, and for a fleeting while, life's weight felt a little lighter. Each sip carried not just flavor, but relief, maybe even communion among those who shared the drink. A group of travelers settles near the fire. Dust clings to their cloaks, their heavy boots caked with mud. Their silence stands out, for unlike the others, they don't arrive with laughter or song. It feels as if they carry something unspoken, and that alone stirs curiosity. This was often how rumors began in taverns, with quiet strangers who provoked more imagination than words ever could. Villagers spun their own tales, and soon the night reshaped itself around new mysteries. Troubadours knew well how easily silence worked on human minds. Sometimes they'd start a song slowly, repeating verses, letting suspense fill the gaps. The crowd, eager, leaned forward, unwilling to miss a single word. This art of stretching time was the magic of medieval storytelling, able to hush even a raucous room into reverent quiet in a heartbeat. The power lay not only in what was spoken, but also in what was left unsaid. It's often forgotten that taverns doubled as makeshift inns. Upstairs, there were sometimes cramped, bare rooms rented to weary travelers. Sleep came on straw covered with woolen sheets, while the sounds of revelry echoed from the floor below. The scent of smoke and sweat rose through the rafters, seeping into every corner. Resting in a tavern wasn't exactly comfortable, but it gave protection from the cold night and the dangers of the road. Then the music shifts. The troubadour clears his voice and begins to sing of knights who once marched east, bound for Jerusalem. The Crusades still lingered in collective memory, filling some with pride, others with doubt. To some, the fight for sacred relics was divine duty. To others, it was nothing but bloodshed. Yet all listened, for within the song lay not only stories, but a mirror of the times they lived in. Inside that hall, everything mingled: faith, doubt, hope, and fear. Male voices rang out with force, softened by women's laughter and the occasional chatter of children brought along by their parents. The smell of cured cheese wove itself with that of roasting meat, clinging to every garment. The fire's heat warmed one's back, while the stone floor beneath still pressed its chill into the feet. This constant contrast defined the tavern experience. And in that space of contrasts, you begin to sense something waiting to be revealed. As if the night itself was holding its breath, a subtle pause falls, so brief it could be missed. The troubadour raises a parchment, yellowed with age, and every eye turns toward him. The air feels suspended, as though even the smoke had halted its climb. There's more than music in the room tonight. There's a hidden story, guarded for generations, now ready to surface. The parchment, lit by the wavering glow of candles, reveals uneven strokes, scribbled by hands long gone. The texture feels rough, almost brittle, and as it unrolls, it crackles like dry leaves caught in the wind. Most in the room can't read, yet the image of a map is clear enough to stir murmurs. The faded ink suggests paths and symbols, as if holding a secret greater than any song. The tavern, once buzzing with voices, sinks into a heavy hush. A young weaver leans closer, her eyes glinting as if something on the parchment rings familiar, perhaps a pattern hidden in its lines and curves. Her hands, trained by endless hours at the loom, seem to trace meaning where others see only marks. It was common for craftsmen, though lacking formal schooling, to sharpen a remarkable gift of observation. Repetition, discipline, and steady gestures nurtured a practical intelligence that caught details scholars often overlooked. The scent of melting wax thickens, blending with the warmth of smouldering wood. The heat indoors pushes against the cold still sneaking in through cracks, a reminder of the unyielding world outside. Coughs echo now and then. Chairs creak, the firewood pops. Ordinary sounds, yet they fade against the tension that grows. The parchment, plain at first glance, seems to carry a weight no one dares name, though everyone feels. The troubadour begins to speak. His voice is steady, though low, as if afraid to break the spell. He tells them the map points to a lost relic, brought back from the Holy Land by knights who never returned. Stories of relics were common in the Middle Ages, blurring lines between faith and superstition. To some, they promised miracles. To others, they were treasures to barter and trade. Everyone, though, knew at least one tale of sacred bones, chalices, or fragments of a cross said to hold power. The fire sparks and flares, casting sudden light across each face. Wonder, doubt, and fascination ripple through the crowd. The rough wood beneath their palms feels sharper now, as if the body itself needed grounding. The warmth, once soothing, now burns with anticipation. It's as if the whole tavern is caught between its everyday rhythm and the possibility of something far greater. In the corner, a monk watches in silence. To most, his presence goes unnoticed, but not to the young weaver. His dark robe hides his movements, though his eyes gleam with unusual intensity. Monks roamed freely, carrying not only faith but the learning of monasteries, yet not all bore holy intentions. Medieval history is filled with accounts of betrayal, power struggles, and quiet games of influence within the church itself. Breath seems to rise and fall in unison, as though the entire room shares a single lung. The troubadour lifts the parchment again, pointing to symbols shaped like stars and mountains. He promises that tonight won't be warmed by music alone, but by a revelation that might change lives. A chair scrapes too loudly across the floor, drawing every gaze. The monk doesn't stir, though his eyes never leave the map. The young weaver grips her spindle tight. It's a small, almost hidden gesture, yet it shows she's ready not only to observe, but to act. The thread slipping through her fingers feels like a metaphor for the night itself, fragile and thin, yet capable of weaving into something lasting. The fire's heat brushes her skin, the waxy scent lingers, and the troubadour's deep voice fills the air. Every detail folds together, as if destiny is spinning its own cloth out of the moment. You realize now that medieval nights weren't made of shadows and cold alone. They were shaped by meetings, by stories colliding, by hopes tucked between the lines of ordinary life. The tavern wasn't merely shelter, it was a stage. Every glance, every gesture might spark a tale destined to echo across centuries. The air feels thicker now, yet alive, as though it breathes with the crowd. Expectation itself hangs so heavy it could be touched with your fingertips. And so, traveler, the invitation is complete. You've stepped through the tavern door, felt both chill and warmth, listened to voices and silences, and now you've glimpsed the beginning of a story still unfolding. This night keeps secrets that ask for patience, like embers that reveal their strength only when stirred gently. The first stretch of the path has opened, and the map holds more to tell. Close your eyes if you wish and rest to the rhythm of these words. The journey has only just begun. The tavern pulses like a heart at the center of the village. Outside, the night's cold still reigns, but in here the warmth of people creates a haven. You notice the contrast. While the wind outside cuts like a blade, inside the air is thick, laden with smoke, laughter, and song. The hum of conversation rises and falls like waves, reminding you that medieval nights moved with collective rhythms. The simple act of sharing a space was already a way to survive. Your eyes take time to adjust to the dim light. Tallow candles and torches fixed to the walls cast a yellow glow that flickers across weary faces and worn tables. The shifting flames give the sense that everything is breathing. You can almost feel the damp, cold edges of the wood, contrasting with the warmer spots in the middle, worn smooth by countless hands. The air smells of roasting fat, mingled with the sweet fermentation of mead. In the center of the hall, the troubadour raises his lute. The instrument seems to shine in the unsteady light, as though it carried something sacred. The strings hum softly, commanding attention without forcing silence. Slowly, the chatter fades, and all eyes turn toward him. Troubadours held this power. In a world with few books and much oral tradition, their voices bridged fact, memory, and imagination. What they played was more than music, it was history itself, woven into verse. You realize you're not alone. Around you sit peasants, weary knights and traveling merchants, all sharing the same room. Their clothes tell their stories. Coarse woolen cloth, frayed cloaks, leather boots hardened by mud. Some bear scars on their faces, reminders of battles, while others show calloused hands from harvests and manual labor. This unlikely mix of lives, seldom seen together elsewhere, found a kind of balance here. For a night, the tavern became a temporary democracy. The young weaver, spindle still in hand, keeps watching. The thread glimmers in the firelight like a strand of gold. She seems untouched by the noise, yet her eyes remain fixed on the troubadour. Whether curiosity, reverence, or instinct, she leans forward slightly, as if sensing that the story about to unfold connects to something far greater. In medieval times, symbols and maps weren't just drawings, they were messages waiting for keen eyes to decode. The tavern keeper moves among the tables with heavy jugs. The sound of liquid pouring into mugs ripples like a tiny waterfall. The scent of cheap wine mixes with the smell of rye bread just brought from the kitchen. Every sip, every bite of bread carried more than flavor. It carried a sense of belonging. To eat and drink together was, in a way, a silent pact of survival, a way to affirm that no one faced the cold and uncertainty of medieval life alone. At a nearby table, two merchants argue over trade routes. Words like Flanders and Genoa slip into their speech, hinting at the vast web of exchanges that linked remote villages to great centers of commerce. Medieval trade stretched far beyond local markets. Spices from the east, fine fabrics, even news of distant lands flowed through such men. Their voices carry the hardness of negotiation, but also the spark of future profits. For those listening, these talks were small windows into the wider world. The troubadour, sensing the crowd's attention, unrolls the parchment once more. The scratchy sound of paper fills the silence, even silencing the dice players. The map's image, though unclear, captures every gaze. Symbols of mountains, rivers, and stars appear as riddles. To touch that parchment would feel rough and cold, as if each line held not just ink, but centuries of untold stories. The tension builds, not sharply, but with a slow, steady suspense. A cold draft slips through the half-open door, reminding everyone that the night outside hasn't relented. Goosebumps rise, and for a moment the room shrinks back from the chill. Then the door closes and warmth spreads again. The contrast deepens the sense of shelter. The tavern isn't just a place, but a shield, its stones and beams carrying the promise of protection. The young weaver narrows her eyes at a symbol on the map. Her fingers pause, the thread swaying in the air as it breaks from her spindle. She says nothing, yet her expression suggests recognition. Perhaps it's only imagination, but those watching sense that this might be the beginning of something larger. As though fate itself, quiet and unseen, had chosen an unlikely witness to unlock what others can only stare at. Medieval knights were rarely ordinary. They always held something beyond appearances. The troubadour holds the parchment with both hands, as if presenting a sacred object. His voice grows firmer as he declares that the map doesn't belong to him alone, but to everyone gathered under that roof. The sound of his words echoes against the stone walls, turning the common room into something almost ceremonial. He pauses deliberately, and in that silence every heartbeat seems louder, as if each person senses that this night will not be like the others. A grey-bearded knight leans closer to study the map. His scarred, calloused hands rest on the table. He speaks rarely, but when he does, his voice is deep and drawn out, like distant thunder. He says such symbols were once seen in Crusader lands, carved into fortress walls and chapel stones. The memory lends weight to what lies before them. For many, the mere mention of Jerusalem or the Holy Land was enough to stir reverence. The weaver remains silent, though her mind works steadily. Weavers were trained to notice invisible patterns, threads that cross, colors that balance, flaws that must be corrected before they unravel. Naturally, her eyes find sense where others see only scribbles. As the troubadour speaks, she follows each line as if it were embroidery, connecting loose points into a larger design. Her craft becomes a lens, allowing her to read what others only imagine. In the shadowed corner, the monk stays still. His heavy robe nearly merges with the darkness, but his eyes glint, sharp and watchful. Monks were not strangers to taverns. They travelled between monasteries, carrying manuscripts, news, or collecting alms. Yet they always carried an air of ambiguity, of secrecy. Monastic life offered not only faith, but also knowledge and influence. Villagers might respect them or fear them, but never dismiss them. Here, his stillness speaks louder than any words. The smoke thickens, scratching at the throat. Candle wax drips onto tables, hardening into little pools that catch the light. To touch that wax would be to feel rough coldness, a reminder that every detail in the room bore the marks of time. Someone bangs a mug impatiently, but the sharp sound is quickly hushed by demanding looks. Something has shifted tonight. An invisible boundary has been crossed. What began as amusement now swells into collective expectation. Outside, the wind howls through the trees, rattling loose doors and shutters. The muffled sound seeps in, a reminder that the world beyond is still wild. Inside, however, human warmth gathers strength. This contrast was essential in medieval life. Safety wasn't found in high walls alone, but in shared presence. The company of many dulled fear, and faith in small, everyday gestures was as strong as stone towers. In that sense, the tavern was a fortress without battlements. The troubadour resumes singing, his voice now weaving history with warning. He tells of knights who carried relics in iron-bound chests, of battles fought in deserts, and of vows sworn before altars. His melody soothes and unsettles at once, as if able to lull and awaken together. The sound vibrates through the air, slipping into ears like a gentle wind, but carrying hidden meaning. Each note seems to stitch the present to the past. On the far side of the hall, children draw near, enchanted by the parchment's glow. Their bright eyes reflect the firelight, as small hands reach toward what they don't understand. The innocent gesture sparks smiles among the adults. In their simplicity, children reminded everyone that life pressed on, even amid secrets and tensions. Their laughter, light and sudden, broke the heaviness of stories and returned humanity to the moment. Often, it was the purity of children that softened the hardness of the age. A drunken man tries to sing along with the troubadour, his voice stumbling out of tune and drawing laughter. For an instant, the tension breaks, replaced by shared mirth. This balance of shadow and joy was typical of medieval life. Even amid plague and war, there was always space for a song, a dance, or a sip of wine. Hope flickered in the most unlikely corners, like embers hidden under ash. It was this alternation that kept people listening, alert. The weaver finally takes a deep breath, as though sealing a silent decision. Her eyes stay locked on the map, her spindle now forgotten in her lap. You sense she has noticed something no one else has, a detail that could alter the course of the night. But she doesn't speak yet. The moment calls for silence, and her patience is its own strength. The fire still crackles, the mead still flows, but in the air hangs a promise. The night is only just beginning. The troubadour sets the lute aside for a moment and runs his fingers across the parchment, as though caressing something alive. The rough texture of his leather cloak contrasts with the fragile smoothness of the old paper, and the gesture stirs murmurs among those gathered. Maps were rare sights in villages, since writing and drawing were privileges of the few. What rests on the table feels like more than lines and ink. It's a promise of mystery, of journey, perhaps even of faith. A strong scent of garlic and onions wafts in from the kitchen. Someone has brought out a steaming pot and set it over the fire. The aroma mingles with the roasted meat and fermented honey, forming a symphony of smells that fills every corner. It's impossible not to feel one's mouth water, even in the middle of greater tensions. So it was in medieval life. Even in uncertain hours, the body reminded everyone of the simple joy of a hot meal in the stillness of night. A young peasant, his eyes wary, rises to ask whether the map might bring nothing but trouble. His voice trembles, but it's honest, reflecting the truth that most there lived off the soil and had little to do with relics or crusades. The troubadour looks at him with patience and replies that every secret carries risk, but also reward. The vague answer is enough to reignite hushed conversations. Between fear and curiosity, people lean in, as if doubt itself were already food enough. The monk, silent until now, stirs for the first time. He adjusts the hood of his robe, hiding his face more deeply, and lays both hands upon the table. The movement seems small, but it draws the weaver's steady gaze. A quiet tension hums between them, like a current in the air. Many villagers avoided challenging monks, yet she shows no sign of fear. The room itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for a clearer move from the shadowed man. The hearth burns hotter, sweat beading on brows and running down temples, the clash of cold draughts sneaking through cracks, and the blaze's heat creates a paradox. Skin prickles and burns all at once. Woolen garments grow damp, sticking to the body, but no one dares move away. The tavern is no longer just shelter, it has become a stage, and leaving would mean abandoning something unrepeatable. A thin, bearded merchant in a blue tunic steps closer to the map. He speaks of stories overheard in faraway markets, rumors of monks hiding relics in fortified monasteries. His voice is hurried, uneasy, as though afraid someone might stop him. He names chalices, saintly bones, fragments of a holy cross. With each word, the villagers' eyes widen, not out of greed but because of the weight of faith. In a world where belief marked the boundary between fear and hope, such tales had the power to shape destinies. The smell of damp leather from travelers' cloaks lingers in the air, recalling the freshness of rain, though it has long since passed. The clang of spoons against plates punctuates the routine of the room, yet beneath this ordinary rhythm, a constant tension thrums. The tavern feels too small for so many thoughts and glances. Its walls, darkened by centuries of smoke, seem to remember not only feasts and songs, but also silent conspiracies. The troubadour lifts his voice again, this time reciting a short verse, almost like a riddle. The star guides the weary man, the mountain keeps its silence, and in the earth's depths lies what time cannot consume. The lines offer no explanation of the map, but they deepen the mystery. That was the power of medieval poetry, to turn the ordinary into eternal, the common into sacred. The audience, even without full understanding, feels they are standing before something larger than words. The weaver grips her spindle tightly, drawing strength from its familiar weight. Her eyes, fixed on the parchment, shine with clarity no one else seems to share. Where others see confusion, she sees pattern, just as she does with the threads she spins each day. She may not yet know how to explain it, but she senses her presence here is no accident. It feels as if something unseen has called her to witness, and in the midst of it all, you glimpse the true wonder of the scene. It's not only the map, nor the promise of a sacred relic, it's the meeting of lives, peasants, knights, monks and merchants, all gathered beneath the wavering firelight, bound by the troubadour's song. Together, they breathe the same air, share the same moment. This is the tavern's true power, to unite what the world outside keeps apart. The first step has been taken, and already the destinies of all present have begun to entwine. The whole room seems to lean toward the map, as if drawn by an invisible magnet. The troubadour notices the power of his revelation and chooses silence, letting each gaze wander across the symbols. That pause, long and deliberate, proves more powerful than any explanation. It's in the space between words that imagination blooms. And there, amid the smoke and the glow of flames, each person begins to form their own version of the story. At last, the monk speaks. His voice is low but sharp, like a blade scraping across stone. He warns that some relics are better left hidden, for they carry both blessing and curse. The silence that follows is heavy, and many drop their eyes, afraid to stir forces beyond their grasp. This tension between faith and fear was woven deep into medieval life, when belief in miracles walked side by side with dread of divine punishment. Each of his words rings like a warning. The troubadour, however, does not waver. With a faint smile, he answers that keeping secrets can also be a betrayal. His tone is calm, yet firm, slicing through the unease with clarity. A few in the crowd sigh in relief, some applaud, while others remain doubtful. The weaver, still silent, watches the two men as though she knows their struggle won't end tonight. The balance between truth and secrecy has become the thread guiding the evening. The smell of spilled wine mixes with melting wax. The damp feel of boots against cold stone reminds everyone that reality still lingers. Even in the midst of revelations, daily life insists on showing itself. That mix of grand and ordinary was the very essence of medieval existence. Alongside talk of relics, there was hunger, cold, and fatigue. It's this blending that makes the scene so vivid, so tangible, so close to anyone who bears witness. A peasant raises his voice, asking for the music to resume. He doesn't understand the map or the disputes. He just longs for the melody that soothes the heart. His plea breaks the tension, and out of respect, the troubadour begins to pluck the lute once more. The sound spreads like balm, filling the cracks left by the heavy words. The soft, steady notes bring calm back to the room. In the end, music is the bridge between those who crave only peace and those who hunger for mystery. The hearth snaps loudly, sending sparks into the air. The flickering light reveals weary faces now softened. Some drink, some whisper, but the atmosphere settles back into balance. It feels as though the tavern itself exhales, releasing the weight it had held. Warmth gathers again, and for a moment everyone senses they are part of the same story, even if its meaning is still unclear. The weaver rests her spindle on her lap, silent. Her thoughts remain hidden from the others, but you can almost glimpse the storm within her mind. She knows there is something waiting to be uncovered, that the map didn't fall into her hands and eyes by accident. The thread she spins each day now seems to run invisibly through the parchment, binding times and destinies together. What lies hidden will reveal itself, but only to those willing to look beyond the surface. The monk bows his head, murmuring in Latin. Few understand, but the tone suggests either prayer or warning. His presence still casts a shadow over the hall, reminding everyone that even among common folk, the church's weight was always felt. Yet the weaver's steady gaze does not soften. Something in his rigidity clashes with the fluid warmth of music and fire. He's like a stone planted in the current, breaking the flow but unable to stop it forever. The troubadour closes his song with a lingering chord. The sound hangs in the air like farewell, yet also like promise. Hands clap, feet stomp, and the room regains part of its lightness. Still, in the depths of every eye, the mark of the night's revelations remains. The drinking and laughter may continue, but the seed of mystery has already been sown. No one present will forget the map, the monk, or the young woman who seemed to understand more than she let on. And so, traveler, the first step has been taken. You've heard the voices, breathed the aromas, touched the textures, and tasted the spirit of a medieval night. But know this is only the beginning. What appears simple hides deep layers, and every face carries a riddle that will reveal itself in time. The fire still burns, the wind still howls outside, and the map still rests on the table. The story, however, has only just begun to unfold. The room seems to shrink around the parchment, as if the walls themselves were breathing with the collective expectation. The troubadour rests his elbows on the table and traces a faint, winding line among the drawn mountains with the tip of his nail. Candlelight glistens in oily patches across the surface, revealing scratches and tiny drops of wax. You catch the sweet, slightly rancid scent of tallow mingling with wood smoke, and for a moment the outside world ceases to exist. All that remains is the map, the suspended song, and the sense that something ancient is stirring. The monk, until then motionless, shifts his weight, and the faint rustle of fabric breaks the stillness. The sound is brief but sharp, and the weaver notices. His eyes bore into the parchment with the intensity of someone chasing a half-forgotten memory. In monasteries, scribes preserved not only sacred texts, but also itineraries, distances between abbeys, notes on bridges, and safe crossings. Some even marked margins with discreet symbols meant for trusted travelers. A parchment blending devotion with direction wouldn't be unusual. It would, in fact, be practical. You sense the air shifting against your skin. Near the hearth it's thick and warm, while by the door it still carries the night's damp chill. The contrast feels like different fabrics brushing against you, coarse wool here, fresh linen there. The smell of freshly split rye bread fills the room, earthy and rich, each crumb snapping between calloused fingers. The body asserts its presence, reminding everyone that hunger and fatigue sit at the same table as mystery. Reality holds fantasy on a gentle leash. The weaver draws a deep breath and quietly asks for the parchment to be turned a quarter turn. The troubadour obliges, and the whole room holds its breath at the simple motion. From this new angle, what seemed random lines now suggest the outline of a valley. The stars appear to chart a path between two unevenly drawn hills. It's an artisan's reading, born from the habit of rotating cloth to check for patterns on the loom. Her method isn't scholarly, it's empirical, and precisely because of that it works. The song the troubadour hasn't yet sung seems to echo even in silence, as if the strings were vibrating without touch. He realizes the weaver has cracked open a corner of the enigma and steps to her side, his closeness an unspoken sign of respect. The audience, once still, edges half a step closer, the stone floor answering with a low chorus of careful footsteps. The innkeeper, watching, sets 2 extra mugs on their table, as though acknowledging that a story worth many nights of retelling has just begun. One detail drifts into awareness like a quiet aside. Many medieval maps weren't maps in the modern sense at all. They were blends of symbols, remembered paths, shrines and water sources. Blacksmiths' forges, bridges, chapels dedicated to certain saints, lone trees. Any of these could serve as signposts to those who knew how to read the land. The parchment before them feels of that lineage, a fusion of geography, devotion, and oral memory. It's less a plan and more an invitation to see the world as text. The monk wets his lips, finally conquering his hesitation. In soft Latin, he names saints tied to springs and mountains, prompting a few listeners to cross themselves discreetly. His words don't rise, but spread like thin smoke. The weaver follows his speech with her eyes, not for theology's sake, but for the threads that might link holy sites with the symbols drawn before her. In many villages, a lone chapel doubled as sanctuary and signpost. To find one in winter was to find warmth, a thin soup, and above all, direction. The room feels suspended between 2 dimensions. The tavern as it is, thick with smoke, drink, and human voices, and the invisible promise contained within the parchment. The crackle of firewood keeps a steady rhythm, like the discreet drum of an ancient ritual. Candlelight throws dancing shadows, and each face touched by the flame takes on the gravity of a painted figure. Even the laughter fades, giving way to whispers, as though everyone knows they are witnessing something greater than tavern songs. A merchant breaks the silence to speak of pilgrims' marks. He describes symbols carved on roadside stones, shells, crosses, circles that pointed to shelter or water. His words stir recognition among the crowd. Many had walked, or at least heard, of the road to Santiago de Compostela, whose fame spread across Europe. That pilgrimage route was more than religious. It was a thread of commerce and culture binding distant villages together. The mention of pilgrimage stirs murmurs of devotion. Some cross themselves, others recall loved ones who left and never returned. The weight of medieval roads was not only mud and hills, but the uncertainty of survival. Many traveled with nothing but faith in strangers' kindness, shared bread, and borrowed roofs. That collective memory reinforces the thought that the parchment may indeed hold instructions for a journey of faith. The hall listens in silence, each person lost in memory. The weaver lifts her eyes and meets the monks. A spark passes between them as though they read the same text with different keys. He carries the written tradition of stone monasteries. She carries the manual tradition etched into calloused fingers. Both know symbols, though by different paths. Their tension is not hostile but alive, like 2 strings tuned to different notes that still create harmony. The tavern becomes a stage for an unseen dialogue between worlds. Meanwhile, the smell of fresh stew drifts through the room, rich with meat, herbs, and cheap wine. Empty stomachs grumble, reminding all that hunger ignores mystery. The iron spoons chill the hand, but the heat of broth sliding down the throat quickly restores balance. This return to routine softens the tension. In the Middle Ages, shared meals were moments of truce. Food carried a nearly sacred weight, and even secrets seemed less daunting when faced with a steaming bowl. An old knight, leaning on his sword, speaks in a rasping voice. He recalls seeing inscriptions like these in fortresses to the east, tied to oaths, sworn over relics. The hall hushes, each dragged word carrying the weight of another world. Younger eyes shine with wonder, imagining deserts and distant walls. His words are brief, yet they let the past seep into the present. The tavern becomes a crossroads of memory, where times long gone press against the now. The hearth spits a tall spark, flashing against the ceiling. Murmurs rise, as if the moment were a sign. But the spark dies quickly, and the fire settles back to its steady beat. The moment reminds everyone how medieval life was steeped in interpretations. A falling star, a clap of thunder, even the flight of birds could be taken as divine messages. For those who saw the sacred woven into the ordinary, even the crackle of fire might foretell something greater. The weaver traces a slanted cross drawn in the corner of the parchment. Her fingers follow the line as though stitching it into place. She murmurs softly, words almost too quiet to catch, sounding more like calculation than prayer. She offers no explanation, only the sense of a logic revealing itself slowly. The troubadour watches her, and the room holds its breath. It feels as if everyone knows the key lies not only in the map, but in the ability to see with eyes trained to notice what others overlook. The monk steps forward, his sandals whispering against the stone like leather brushing rock. In a voice smooth with studied courtesy, he asks if he may touch the parchment. The troubadour gives a gesture that is half permission, half warning. When the monk's fingers graze the edge, you almost feel with him the chill of his hands, dry, careful, the hands of a scribe wary of smudging ink. The parchment's scent, a blend of animal glue, smoke and thyme, rises like an ancient breath, commanding reverence. He points, without touching, to tiny letters etched along one of the symbols. They look like abbreviations, not a continuous phrase. Many monastic manuscripts use shorthand signs to save ink and space, with each abbey developing its own conventions. The monk murmurs two possible readings, while the weaver, alert, measures the spacing of the marks with her eyes, like testing the rhythm of a woven pattern. It feels as if both are translating different languages from the same fabric. The light shifts when someone opens the door for a late arrival. A cold gust sweeps through, making skin prickle awake, a reminder that night still waits outside. The door closes, warmth returns, and the image of a blacksmith's bellows comes to mind. The room inhales and exhales through its cracks. In the Middle Ages, heat and cold ruled daily life more surely than royal decrees. The tavern is the interval where bodies negotiate with the season. The weaver asks for the parchment to be turned again, just a few fingers to the right. The movement is slight, yet the reading changes. Two curved lines align with the sketch of a solitary tree. Lone trees in open fields often served as landmarks, resting places where deep roots and wide canopies offered shade to the weary. The link between tree and tilted cross suggests to her a humble chapel built nearby, like those raised by grateful pilgrims. The innkeeper arrives with hot bread, its crust crackling. The smell of toasted grain loosens tense shoulders. Biting into it is to hear crispness give way to tender warmth, a small feast in the mouth that restores humanity to the room. Eating in medieval times was also a kind of listening. The crunch of bread, the clink of spoons, the bubbling of a pot, all were sounds of safety. If there was fire, food and bread, the world was, for a moment, in order. The monk, now steadier, whispers the name of a saint tied to healing springs. Someone confirms having heard elders speak of waters that draw out fever near northern cliffs. Such springs often became local pilgrimage sites, where people left ribbons, coins, scraps of cloth as tokens of prayer or thanks. The belief that water and stone held virtue didn't sound far-fetched here. It was familiar, domestic, inherited. The weaver tucks this detail into her mental tapestry, another shade of color in the map. A young merchant, his accent foreign, speaks of a valley cut by watermills. Windmills were rare. Here, water's force drove wood, stone, and grain. Mills not only ground rye, but also marked trails. Their steady churn could guide travelers in fog. In this case, sound was map. At the description, the troubadour smiles faintly, as though an old verse has found proof in living memory. The hall seems to accept that the drawing can be heard as well as seen. The weaver returns to the shell-shaped symbol and measures with her knuckles the distances between shell, tree, tilted cross, and water lines. Her body calculates what the cartographer's hand could not write. Cloth is read this way, through the play of fullness and void, light and shadow, warp and weft. It's a knowledge rooted not in letters, but in touch and proportion. When she finishes her silent measurement, she lets out a quiet, the sound of someone finding the exact tension that keeps fabric from puckering. At that moment, the monk betrays a tiny slip. His eyes dart too quickly to a corner of the parchment no one has mentioned. The weaver notices and tilts her head. He regains composure, but the glance has been seen. There is no accusation, only the realization that he, too, is searching for something specific. The awareness does not heighten tension, it deepens the story. Like a spiderweb revealed under dew, the design was always there, invisible, awaiting light. The troubadour clears his throat and sings a single line, like a drawing made in sound. Where the star kisses the water, the earth opens its mouth. The phrase hangs in the air, sweet and ambiguous. The room holds its breath, and in the echo of that short verse, the weaver presses her finger to the corner the monk had glanced at. The parchment creaks faintly under her touch. There lies a tiny mark, a square with faint lines like iron fittings, something that could be nothing, or the very beginning of everything. The silence that settles is almost tangible. The fire still crackles, yet its sound feels muffled, as though the entire room waits for the meaning of a single gesture. The weaver's finger rests firmly on the small square drawn on the parchment. To many, it is nothing but a scribble. To her, it is a knot in the thread, small but essential to keep the fabric from unraveling. The troubadour leans closer, and even the monk, cautious as ever, edges nearer to the flame. The wavering candlelight shows that the square is traced with heavy, repeated strokes, as if the cartographer insisted on its shape. That persistence suggests intention. In the medieval world, iron chests were common, used to store coins, tools, manuscripts, and sometimes holy relics. The symbol, though rough, seems to echo that idea, a container meant to guard something precious. No one speaks it aloud, but the thought drifts through the crowd, shared in silence. The smell of burning wood mingles with melting wax, thickening the air. The rough surface of the table steadies the arms of those leaning in. The weaver runs her finger along the square's edge, as if confirming her instinct. The troubadour, instead of singing, recites softly, "Some treasures are not made of gold, but of symbols, hidden in plain sight, able to outlast centuries." His words ring like a prayer disguised as poetry. The monk shifts uneasily and interrupts, warning that not all secrets should be revealed. His voice is sharper now, and some villagers avert their gaze. It seems his fear lies not in the discovery itself, but in what might follow. Tension returns, though gently. The weaver holds steady, her calm eyes defying his caution. There is quiet strength in her persistence, the courage of one who knows that some mysteries find peace only when shared. The troubadour plucks his lute again. The notes fall slowly, like drops echoing in a deep well. Music softens the weight of words and restores rhythm to the moment. The sound of strings weaves with the fire's crackle, creating a double texture. Music and flame, harmony and warmth. Humanity returns, reminding all that even secrets cannot quench the need for beauty. The room exhales, though eyes remain fixed on the parchment. An old merchant murmurs that iron chests were often reinforced with crossed bands, much like the square in the drawing. He recalls abbeys with coffers holding not only relics, but royal letters, pilgrim coins, and noble gifts. These strongboxes were said to withstand fire and plunder. His comment sends a shiver through the listeners, the thought that the drawing may indeed mark a real chest, not just a metaphor. The weaver smiles faintly, as though confirming in silence what she already knew. She picks up her spindle again, the thread spinning back into rhythm, as if life had never paused. This small gesture restores balance to the room, reminding everyone that daily life endures. Even when sacred secrets knock at the door, there is still spinning, eating, drinking. Medieval balance lived precisely in that, the extraordinary and the ordinary, side by side. The monk closes his eyes and chants in Latin, a short phrase about guardians and trials. Few understand, but its tone carries like a deep hymn. Whether warning or prayer, it calms him, and the villagers honor it with silence. The troubadour joins with long, low notes, building a bridge between faith and song. Together they weave an invisible mantle over the tavern, and for a moment tension shifts into reverence. Smoke thickens, spiraling toward the wooden beams. Heat presses down on shoulders, and some wipe sweat from their brows. The scents of soup, wine, and smoke cling to clothes and hair. It is a full immersion. Sight blurred by haze, smell engulfed by mingling odors, touch caught in rough wood and damp cloth, hearing wrapped in voices and strings. Each sense is called forth, turning the night into a memory destined to become legend. And so, traveler, the deeper truth reveals itself, not only a map, but a puzzle of symbols, gestures, and silences. The weaver reads with trained eyes, the monk carries secrets, the troubadour weaves poetry, and the villagers carve the moment into their hearts. The night continues, but it is no longer the same. Something has awakened, and no one will ever forget it. Close your eyes if you wish, and hold to the certainty that mysteries do not unfold all at once, but in layers, and the next layer still waits. Dawn creeps closer, and the tavern seems to breathe at a new rhythm. The heat of the flames no longer weighs as before, and the night's chill begins to slip back through the cracks. The troubadour rolls the parchment carefully and lays it on the table, while the weaver leans back, gathering her strength. The monk, still rigid, remains motionless, his posture betraying unease. The atmosphere, once suspended, shifts gently toward an inevitable transition. The candles, now melted into stubby towers, flicker with short, wavering flames. The air takes on the damp scent of smoke, as if the early hours were forcing their way inside. The rough grain of the worn bench presses against your palms, grounding you in the present. Conversations fade into hushed murmurs that slide from table to table. It's no longer the anticipation of revelation that fills the room, but the quiet certainty of change. Silent, steady, like the moon lowering beyond the horizon. The weaver gathers her spindle, winding the thread with practiced motions. The troubadour watches, knowing the time of unveiling has passed. Now is the moment for keeping, yet the gleam in her eyes shows that her mind continues its work, as if the map had etched invisible patterns into her memory. This shift from action to withdrawal feels natural. In the Middle Ages, what was shown in public was often only the surface. The true labor happened later, in the quiet rhythm of daily life. The monk finally rises. The rustle of his habit against the floor breaks the silence, drawing every gaze. He walks to the door, opens it slowly, and a rush of cold air cuts across the hall. It carries with it the smell of damp earth and chilled wood. Skin prickles, a stark reminder that the world outside is vast and merciless. When the door closes behind him, the weight of his absence lingers, as though something unseen has left with him. Restless, the troubadour plucks his lute without singing. Only loose strings vibrate, sighs of sound floating in the air. They mingle with the crackle of the fire, shaping an improvised lament. Some villagers close their eyes, lulled by the rhythm. Others stay alert, watching the door, as if expecting it to swing open again. That duality, between the wish to dream and the need to keep watch, was a hallmark of medieval nights. The innkeeper moves among the tables, collecting empty mugs, muttering under his breath. His work goes on, untouched by mystery. He wipes a cloth over the damp wood, spreading the scent of sour wine and soaked timber. The ordinary gesture clashes with the night's gravity, a reminder that life does not pause for secrets. Survival depends on routine, serving, cleaning, storing away. The tavern, for all its revelations, remains kitchen, shelter, and livelihood. This blend of the extraordinary and the mundane is what keeps balance alive. A few villagers stand, stomping their boots against the stone floor to chase away the cold. The dull thud echoes like muted drums, and fine dust stirs into the air. The smell of wet leather mingles with the earthy scent of straw scattered across the ground to soak spills. It is a reminder that taverns were not tidy. They were places of clutter, flies, and pungent odors. Yet no one minds. Warmth and company outweigh discomfort. The passage from night into dawn is subtle but undeniable. The body senses it first, heavy eyelids, limbs aching from cold and waiting. Then the mind begins to yield, gently slipping into drowsiness. The fire, once crackling loudly, now hums like a steady whisper. Its warmth no longer scorches but wraps evenly like a cloak. The tavern exhales in the rhythm of rest. The secret still lingers, but it's tucked away for now. The story waits for its next turn, like a river pausing before it bends. The wind howls outside, and the wooden beams creak as if protesting the effort of holding the structure upright. That was the soundscape of a medieval night. Gusts of wind, the snap of branches, the footsteps of wandering animals. Every noise carried a question. Was it just nature or something else lingering nearby? The cold touch of the stone walls reminds you of the tavern's fragile strength, still a fortress against the vastness beyond. The weaver adjusts her thick wool skirt, tucking the fabric tighter around her legs. The chill keeps pressing in, and the simple gesture shields her. Her hands continue spinning the thread, though there's no real need. The movement serves as a bridge between thought and calm. She knows something shifted this night, yet understands that the deepest secrets never reveal themselves all at once. The thread slipping through her fingers becomes a silent metaphor for the patience that sustains her life. The innkeeper bolts the shutters with heavy wooden bars. The sharp thud echoes like a hammer strike, sealing the end of a cycle. Smoke lingers heavier inside, trapped in the closed space, yet the bodies gathered accept its thickness as part of shelter. The candlelight steadies, safe from the drafts. A sense of collective retreat settles in, as if everyone understands that the late hours demand less movement and more listening. Outside, the brief clatter of hooves rings along the distant road. Villagers glance at one another, some whispering, others silent. Horsemen traveling at night were rare, often bound to urgent missions or flight. The troubadour furrows his brow but stays quiet. The sound fades as quickly as it came, and silence takes its place. That small, fleeting detail lingers like a shadow, suggesting that something larger stirs beyond these walls, unseen yet present. The hearth breathes heat in uneven bursts, flames rising and falling like tired lungs. Close to the fire, the warmth is fierce. Just a step away, the cold presses back in. That fragile balance mirrors survival itself in the Middle Ages. Never too much cold, never too much heat. Fire gave life, but it also carried risk. Entire villages had burned in its wake, and even on quiet nights, that memory smoldered in the back of people's minds. Seated in a corner, the troubadour brushes his fingers across the strings without pressing them down. The sound is faint, a murmur blending with the crack of wood. He seems more absorbed in thought than music, as if the notes were dialogue with his own heart. A few villagers ask for lighter songs, free of mystery. He smiles and sings gentle verses about spring's return. The shift is clear. The weight of secrets gives way to the soft hope of seasons that never fail to come back. A child sleeps in her mother's lap, her light snore folding into the hum of the room. The faint scent of sour milk on the woman's clothes mixes with wine and bread. It's a small detail, yet deeply human. In the Middle Ages, children were part of public life. They followed parents to markets, feasts, even taverns. Their presence was a reminder that life's cycle did not pause, even among secrets and symbols. Innocence rested, while the grown kept watch. The wind pounds against the wooden walls, its deep rumble like a faraway drum. Each strike makes the candles flicker, shadows stretching and swaying across the ceiling. Faces caught in the glow appear elongated, as if carved into figures of smoke and stone. For a fleeting moment, the room feels haunted, suspended in a threshold between worlds, not yet the day to come, but no longer an ordinary night. The weaver sets her spindle into the straw basket and pulls her cloak tighter around her shoulders. The cold insists on pressing through, and her body seeks warmth, yet her mind lingers on the square drawn on the parchment. The symbol seems to follow her, etched into her gaze. She knows that when she leaves, she'll still see it, in the cloth she spins, in the stones along the road, in the dreams that await. The greatest change is the one that has already begun inside her. The troubadour moves slowly through the room, bidding good night to those still awake. His voice is soft, but each word carries like a blessing. Rest well. The night has been generous to you. His gentle tone does more than commands ever could, and the room answers with nods and quiet smiles. That was the singer's role in the Middle Ages, not just to entertain, but to guide emotions, shepherding memories and hopes. His presence bridges mystery with comfort. Some villagers spread out makeshift blankets and lie on the floor, leaning against benches or the walls. The smell of straw mingles with sweat, wine, and smoke, thick but familiar. Sleeping in taverns was common, and the soundscape of slumber, snores, footsteps, whispered talk, became part of the night. Collective living left no room for complete silence. Even rest was shared, as though no one could dream alone. The innkeeper gathers the last mugs and snuffs out several candles. Darkness deepens, and eyes take their time adjusting. The touch of the cold stone floor reminds everyone that despite the shelter, hardship never fully disappears. That sense was part of daily life. Even in comfort, reminders of life's roughness lingered. The dance between heat and cold, light and dark, never vanished. It only found a fragile balance. The innkeeper drapes thick cloths over the barrels, guarding what remains of the drink. The muted scent of resting wine mingles with the herbs burning in the hearth. The damp touch of the fabric on his hands is a reminder of the constant effort to preserve. The tavern was more than stage for stories. It was also storehouse for survival. Wine, bread, salted meat. Keeping was as important as serving, and each gesture of care carried tomorrow on its shoulders. The scent of burned wood lingers, woven into hair, clothes, and skin. This aroma, common to homes and taverns alike, marked medieval life with a lasting signature. Running a hand along the roughened walls reveals centuries of smoke-staining stone black. Nothing here is clean or new, but everything endures. Time's presence etched into things teaches that permanence itself can be beautiful, that even soot holds memory. The weaver opens her eyes and gazes at the nearest candle flame. The wick is nearly swallowed by wax, yet it persists. It's a living metaphor for the moment, endurance in the face of wearing down. Her fingers instinctively find the thread left unfinished, spinning it once more. Weavers spun even in pauses, for the craft was as constant as breath. But here, the gesture isn't obligation. It's a bridge between thought and calm. The thread becomes a silent prayer. Across the room, a group of travelers adjusts cloaks and packs, readying themselves to leave at first light. The sound of leather creaking and buckles fastening blends with the troubadour's murmur. Setting out before dawn is risk, yet also a chance to reach markets early. Their movement reminds everyone that life does not halt for secrets. Routine demands roads, trade, steady steps. Change lies not only within, but also beyond these walls. The monk hasn't returned. His absence weighs more than his silence ever did. Few speak of it, but glances drift toward the door, half expecting him to reappear. The weaver senses her path will cross his again. In the Middle Ages, destiny was seen as a woven pattern, threads that meet, cross, break, and return. The monk's departure is not an ending, but a pause in a greater design. The troubadour's melody shifts, lightening, almost playful. Smiles ripple across the room, lifted by hope. The tune seeps through like timid sunlight sneaking between cracks. Though dawn has yet to break, the night no longer feels heavy. Hearts lean toward the day ahead. This sway between shadow and light, burden and hope, keeps the vigil alive. The music fulfills its role as gentle guide. The innkeeper extinguishes another candle, deepening the dark. Only a few flames remain, enough to guide steps to benches and straw mats. Silence grows, broken only by the soft snores of those already asleep. The touch of cold stone beneath mingles with the warmth of straw scattered as bedding. It's real discomfort, yet accepted as luxury. In villages where plenty was rare, any covered, heated space was a blessing. The tavern fulfills its role as temporary haven. The weaver closes her eyes again, though she does not sleep. In her mind, the square on the map glows as if lit from within. The symbol resurfaces whenever she tries to let it fade, asking silently for her attention. She feels chosen by the mystery, not the other way around. This realization doesn't bring fear, but calm. A weaver knows to trust time. Threads reveal their patterns slowly. Outside, dawn stirs. The air softens, less biting, more damp. The scent of wet earth seeps through the cracks, carrying promise of light. Roosters crow again, this time in chorus, trumpets of the new day. Their sound swells into the hall, mingling with the troubadour's final chords. The great emotion is underway, darkness giving way to clarity, vigil yielding to rest. The hearth burns low, embers glowing deep red, pulsing like a heart slowing after strain. Watching the fire die brings both melancholy and peace. Every flame must rest. The remaining heat is gentle, like a light cloak on weary shoulders. The fading fire closes the night with perfect metaphor. After intensity comes surrender. The fire sleeps with the men. The weaver rests her head on her arm and finally gives in to sleep. The troubadour sets aside his lute, folding his arms over his chest like a guardian at rest. The innkeeper bolts the main door, last act of care before settling down himself. The hall falls quiet. Only the sound of shared breathing fills the space, a low chorus of an unseen choir. Rest, too, is communal, like everything in that night. And still the map remains. Its silence speaks louder than any song. Bound in leather, pressed to the troubadour's chest, it waits. No revelation is lost. It only sleeps alongside the men. Mystery doesn't vanish. It lingers, awaiting the moment to stir again. This waiting is part of its weave. Not every secret can be grasped at once. Some require the slow rhythm of days. Outside, the village awakens. Doors creak open, hens scatter, hurried footsteps press against damp earth. Life resumes its cycle, yet the tavern holds its silence, guarding the uncommon night within. The contrast is stark. The world stirs awake while the shelter slumbers. Movement is not only physical but symbolic. What was seen here will echo long after words fade. The first ray of sunlight pierces the narrow window, striking suspended smoke. The sight is nearly magical, golden dust dancing in the heavy air. Those waking see it as a sign of renewal, a promise of day. The fresh scent of morning mingles with charred wood, weaving a perfume of transition. The change is complete, from a night of secrets to a dawn of routine. The tavern opens to a new day, yet still carries traces of what passed. And so, traveller, the passage is made. You've followed the weight of night and the lightness of dawn, the secret revealed and the rest shared. The shift took place not only outside, but within every gaze and breath. The story flows on, like a river that never ceases to run. Close your eyes and carry with you the certainty that day will bring new steps, new voices, new revelations. For now, rest. Change has already come. Morning arrives shyly, and the tavern wakes in a lazy hush. The troubadour still keeps the parchment pressed against his chest, yet his eyes linger on details he hadn't noticed before. The worn texture of the wooden tables, the uneven gleam of iron nails, the dust gathered deep in the cracks of the stone floor. It's as if, after a night of secrets, every small object now whispers its own silent story. His gaze narrows, letting the vast world fade so the intimate can come into view. The weaver plucks a stray thread from her skirt and winds it around her finger. Almost without thinking, she shapes a small, soft spiral. She smiles at the simple form that slips from her hands, and in that instant, she understands. It isn't only great maps that hold mysteries, but fragile details too, like a thread that insists on curling on its own. Everyday life hides smaller secrets, no less powerful. A bird lands on the window, pecking at the wood. The sharp, repetitive sound draws everyone's eyes. The small creature, so common and usually forgotten, becomes the center of attention. Its quick-beating chest, the sheen of its feathers, the short call echoing through the room, all form an intimate scene that might otherwise pass unseen. In the Middle Ages, birds were often read as omens, but here they are nothing more than silent witnesses to the morning's awakening. The innkeeper serves hardened bread from the night before. The sound of the crust breaking with effort fills the hall. Its smell is faint, but still warm with memory. This detail, stale bread softened by wine, says more about medieval life than any banquet ever could. The intimate gaze reveals that survival was born of repetition, of using every crumb, of the poor making do with what they had. Even a hard crust of bread can be living history. The hearth, now with only a few embers, still gives off a gentle heat. The soft red glow of the coal, the faint crackle, the trembling shadows across the floor. Each seems small, yet together they shape the whole atmosphere. Beauty lies in these details of silence. The sight of a single ember can carry more hope than a blazing fire. The weaver watches and feels that faint flame is a mirror of her own endurance. The troubadour plucks a single string on the lute, and the sound lingers in the air. It's not music, but an echo. That lone, stretched note fills the room with calm. Through an intimate gaze, even one sound becomes an event. For attentive ears, it isn't just a tone, but the tavern itself breathing. And so the morning takes shape, out of small gestures, sounds, and scents. The extraordinary now is found in the ordinary revealed. The innkeeper wipes the counter with a damp cloth. The scent of wet wood blends with that of wine. With each stroke, the surface takes on a quiet sheen, as if exhaling relief. The meaning here isn't in the cleaning, but in the ritual itself. Repeating the gesture day after day is a way of keeping order amid chaos. The counter, witness to secrets and conversations, receives this attention as an altar accepts offerings. Such small gestures sustain the space. A young villager watches a candle flame until the wax drips onto his fingers. The heat stings, yet he doesn't pull away. Instead, he shapes the cooled drop with curiosity. This intimate experience, playing with wax, feeling both mild pain and pleasure in the hardened texture, was a common memory of the time. Children and adults alike, with no elaborate toys, turned simple materials into distraction. The detail of play was an essential part of life. The innkeeper steadies a wobbly chair, slipping a piece of wood beneath its leg. The sharp scrape echoes, and the chair stands firm again. It's a small gesture, but essential. Improvised repairs like this were part of medieval life, where fixing and mending always replaced buying new. An intimate gaze values this scene. A chair propped up by a wedge is itself a picture of survival. A dog lying in the corner stretches and lets out a long sigh. The animal's scent mingles with the smell of damp hay, shaping the atmosphere of a rural home. The detail rests in the sound. That heavy breath reminds everyone that even beasts share the shelter. In the Middle Ages, dogs weren't only guardians, but also companions through cold nights, curled close to men. The dog's sigh is an intimate music of togetherness. The innkeeper places dried herbs into a small clay bowl near the hearth. Slowly, the air fills with rosemary, rue, and thyme. These scents, so common in medieval homes, served not only to perfume, but also to ward off insects and cleanse the air. The intimate detail lies in this nearly invisible gesture, one that transforms the entire atmosphere. The room seems to breathe easier, and everyone senses the change without speaking of it. The weaver gathers her loose hair, tying it back with a worn ribbon. Its color has long since faded, but its softness remains from years of use. The intimate touch of something so simple carries memories of childhood, of mothers braiding hair and sisters sharing ribbons. An intimate gaze shows that not only great inheritances sustain memory, but also the smallest scraps of cloth used daily. The ribbon is a symbol of continuity. A villager hums a tune under his breath, his voice still rough from wine, filling the air with a repetitive melody. It's no performance, but an echo of memory. These simple songs, often without known authors, drifted across generations. The detail here is that each singer shaped them differently, adapting them to their village. An intimate look sees that the music of the people never needed a stage. It only needed a lone voice among stone walls. The troubadour watches the innkeeper's hands as he cuts fresh bread. The knife scrapes with effort, releasing the sweet aroma of wheat, richer than wine. The detail lies in the labor. Bread was not always abundant, and every slice was measured. This intimate, routine scene tells more of medieval life than any chronicle of battles. Survival was written in the sound of a blade carving bread. The weaver runs her finger over a splinter jutting from the table and feels the sharp scratch on her skin. The small sting recalls the rough hemp she once spun, its coarse fibers cutting her hands. Such marks were part of the craft and rarely lamented. The intimate gaze transforms light pain into memory of perseverance. Even a splinter can become a bridge to hidden stories in calloused fingers. The innkeeper pours water into a clay jug, a simple but significant act. In the Middle Ages, water wasn't always clean, and to drink it was to trust the source. The detail here is not the liquid itself, but the vessel, thick, cool clay keeping it fresh. The sound of water striking cups echoes like music of routine. An intimate gaze finds beauty in that sound, reminding us that survival was made of slow sips. A villager props his boots near the fire, releasing the pungent smell of wet leather. To some, unpleasant. To them, inseparable from daily life. The detail rests in the heat, drying the leather, hardening it, then giving off faint smoke. An intimate gaze understands that even strong odors build the memory of a time. What offends becomes identity. The weaver looks at the dog, sleeping once more. The animal stirs, dreaming, whimpers softly, and its paw twitches as if in a chase. That canine dream is the detail, one that draws quiet laughter from those watching. In the intimacy of the tavern, even the sleep of animals is shared. An intimate gaze shows life is made of such fleeting images, etched in memory with tenderness. The troubadour runs his hand through his hair, brushing it from his face. It's an ordinary gesture, yet the detail lies in the fine dust that shakes free, the residue of smoke clinging to him. This faint dirt, almost unseen, was part of medieval life. Clothes, hair, and walls carried the fire's scent. An intimate look sees not neglect, but coexistence with the house itself. The body bore the imprint of its home. The innkeeper unlatches the small side window, letting the morning air in. The contrast is instant. The trapped warmth collides with the chill from outside. The detail lies in sensation, the goosebumps on skin, the smell of damp earth, the breath of wind clearing the lungs. An intimate gaze recognizes that even air has texture, and every breath holds the memory of place. The weaver runs her fingers along the thread kept in her distaff, feeling its softness against her rough skin. That simple contact carries her back to childhood, when she first learned to spin under her mother's watchful eyes. The small gesture becomes a bridge between generations, and the faint stretch of the thread sounds almost like a song only she can hear. An intimate gaze reveals that even silence holds music. The troubadour plucks a short scale on his lute. The sound drifts lightly through the air, but the real detail is the smile that escapes his lips. He doesn't sing, just lets the melody rest like a breeze. In the Middle Ages, many musicians tuck secrets into slight variations of notes, enough to distinguish one village from the next. This almost invisible detail was a mark of identity. Each tuned string carried collective memory. The innkeeper lifts a piece of salted meat from a barrel. The heavy scent spreads. Salt, fat, damp wood. The detail isn't the food itself, but the way salt preserves, keeping rot at bay. An intimate gaze uncovers the ingenuity of routine, turning a simple technique into a shield against hunger. Opening the barrel feels nearly ceremonial, for every piece meant endurance against famine. A villager drags a hand across his face, rasping over his uneven beard. The coarse sound carries in the quiet. The detail lies in that texture. An unshaven face meant hard work, not neglect. In medieval times, shaving was reserved for special occasions, and rough beards told the story of a tough life. An intimate look sees that even beards speak history. The innkeeper lights an oil lamp. The air fills with its dense, faintly sweet scent. The detail is the steadiness of its flame, glowing without flicker. This kind of light, though simple, was a small triumph for medieval knights. An intimate look shows that even illumination carries history. Each flame is a memory of human effort against darkness. The weaver watches the dog, licking crumbs off the floor. The wet, steady sound echoes softly. The detail lies in the natural sharing. Men and animals dividing space, scraps, warmth. In an intimate gaze, there's no real difference between bread for a man and food for the dog. Both belong to the same community of survival. A villager steps up to the hearth and stretches his hands close. The heat burns quickly, but he doesn't pull away. The detail is the search for balance, drawing near until it hurts, then retreating just before. This simple act is a lesson in equilibrium. An intimate gaze shows survival as a dance between extremes, and even warming oneself holds wisdom. The troubadour sings a brief verse about the morning. His voice is low, nearly a whisper, making it feel like a private conversation with each listener. The detail isn't in the words, but in the softness of tone. An intimate gaze perceives how a single voice can outweigh all the world's noise. That short song imprints itself more deeply than a whole epic. The weaver holds the thread against the light of the window, watching its thin transparency. The detail of the delicate weave reveals patience in every turn of the distaff. She smiles to herself, realizing that even the smallest strand holds strength. An intimate gaze shows that life is built on such tiny resistances, which together uphold the world. The innkeeper offers cups of clear water. The detail lies in the light, shimmering inside, bright, pure, rare. In a time when water was not always safe, seeing it so was a blessing. An intimate look finds beauty hidden in a single cup of water. The simple act of serving, so ordinary, becomes an act of hope. A villager cuts into a wedge of aged cheese. The sharp crack of the blade carries through the room, and the rich scent rises. The detail is its grainy texture, shaped by months of waiting. In the Middle Ages, time itself was an ingredient, and nothing came without patience. An intimate gaze sees how even cheese holds lessons. To ripen is to learn how to wait. The weaver rests her head on the table, eyes half closed. The detail lies in the rhythm of her breathing, slow, steady. That gentle cadence is invisible music. An intimate gaze recognizes that even the act of breathing can tell a story, if listened to with care. Every sigh is a thread of life. And so, traveler, the morning's intimacy unfolds. It's not battles or secrets that speak loudest of the Middle Ages, but the smallest gestures, the hard crust of bread, the fragile flame, the wound thread, the sleeping dog. The intimate gaze teaches us that the extraordinary hides in the ordinary, and that each detail holds a whole world. Carry this lesson as we move on. There is always more to discover in what seems simple. Morning settles in, and the tavern wakes with broader movement. The gaze, once fixed on small details, now stretches beyond the tables, reaching toward the village beginning to breathe outside. The troubadour opens the door, and a soft light spills in. carrying the fresh scent of damp earth and the scattered calls of roosters. The contrast is sharp, from the warm shelter of the dim room to the open vastness beyond. It's the start of an expansion, when small gestures find their place within the whole. The weaver lifts her distaff and decides to carry it outside. The simple act enlarges the scene. Work is no longer hidden indoors, but shared with the square. She sits on a bench by the doorway and begins to spin, her fingers moving swiftly. Children gather, watching, some copying her with twigs, turning the craft into play. The faint twist of thread joins in harmony with their laughter. The sun breaks slowly through the clouds, spreading golden light over damp rooftops. The glow restores hope, and the chill of night yields to the morning's soft warmth. Skin feels the change instantly, shivers fade, replaced by a gentle heat. Expansion includes the natural world too, opening into a broad landscape. The village is wrapped in the new day, the tavern no longer an isolated world, but a living part of the scene. The innkeeper sets benches outside, offering places for those who wish to watch the square. The scrape of wood against stone joins the rhythm of footsteps. The once intimate details of the room dissolve into a larger tableau, people chatting, scents mingling, voices rising in layered tones. This polyphony of sound marked medieval mornings when everything began at once: prayers, trade, labor. A merchant opens his stall, displaying bright fabrics that sway in the wind. Reds and blues blaze against the grey of stone, a sudden show of colour. The sharp, sweet scent of dyes fills the air. The scene widens further. The world isn't just wood and smoke, but vivid colour carried from long, distant roots. The weaver watches, recognizing that the thread she spins is tied to cloths that have crossed seas. The troubadour sings light verses about the morning. His voice, now carried into the square, mingles with the cries of sellers. The sound blends into the whole, no longer standing apart. In this widened view, everything becomes a chorus: music, voices, footsteps, and the lowing of animals driven to market. It's life itself in motion, woven from sound and colour. This communion deepens the sense of belonging. No one stands alone when the village awakens as one. The weaver, spinning on her bench by the door, notices the curious eyes of a newly arrived traveller. He watches the spindle whirl with fascination, as though under a spell. His wonder joins the larger picture. For someone from afar, even the simplest act is extraordinary. Expansion shows how each foreign gaze adds a new layer to the scene. The world doesn't end at the village. It lives in constant dialogue between those who arrive and those who depart. The traveller approaches slowly, the sound of his boots echoing against the uneven stones of the street. The worn leather speaks of many roads behind him. He greets the innkeeper, who replies with a simple nod. That small gesture, so quiet, expands in the larger context. A stranger welcomed not with words, but with silent hospitality. The widening view shows the village growing not just in space, but in encounters. A group of peasants passes by, carrying bundles of firewood on their backs. The scent of freshly cut wood blends with the damp earth in the air. The crack of branches knocking together keeps time with their steps. These daily labours form part of the greater tapestry of medieval life. Without wood, there is no heat, no bread, no light. The scene reveals how the collective depends on the unseen work of many. The troubadour watches the peasants, and without breaking his song, weaves verses to include them. He improvises, praising strong shoulders and the fire that warms all. The crowd laughs, recognizing themselves in his tune. This widening shows how music mirrors the day, able to grow alongside the square's movement. The lute no longer sings of mystery, but of life renewed with each morning. The weaver lifts her eyes from the spindle and listens to the vendor's cries. Voices overlap in a near-chaotic mix, offers of fish, cheese, honey, and salt. The detail of each word dissolves into a collective chorus. This clamour is part of the village's soul, a sign of abundance and exchange. The smell of food drifts through the square, a complex blend that is both trade and celebration. A priest crosses the street, rosary beads slipping between his fingers. Their faint clicking is steady, like a clock. He murmurs prayers, and some pause to make the sign of the cross. That private detail grows into a communal act, faith woven through the marketplace, a reminder that sacred and worldly lives share the same ground. The distant toll of the church bell reinforces this meeting of worlds. A blacksmith strides past, his apron still marked with soot. The metallic tang of hot iron seems to linger around him even away from the forge. The dark dust on his skin expands as a symbol of his craft, essential for weapons, tools, and fittings. In the wider view, the smith is not just a man, but a vital force in the village's machinery. His work resonates far beyond his workshop, shaping everyone's daily life. The innkeeper watches the growing bustle with quiet pride. The tavern, once a night refuge, is now an extension of the square. He knows his space doesn't stand alone, but as part of a greater body. The scent of soup simmering drifts outward, drawing eyes and steps his way. The detail of his bubbling pot expands into a promise of nourishment. In this widening, taste too has its place. A group of children chases after a dog, their laughter ringing high. The dog's bark blends with their giggles, turning the animal into part of the morning show. This simple scene broadens the sense of the village. It holds secrets, faith, trade, and also play. The human world is never complete without the sounds of childhood, reminding all of life's constant renewal. The weaver smiles at the children, then sets her spindle spinning again. The intimate detail of her thread now mingles with the wide rhythm of the square. Each twist of fiber carries continuity, but here, among the crowd, it takes on a larger meaning. Not just her thread, but a strand in the community's fabric. The widening reveals that even the most private gesture sustains the whole. The troubadour pauses his song to tell a brief story. He speaks of how old marketplaces were also places of justice, where judges gathered in the open square to settle disputes. That historical memory broadens the vision. The square isn't only trade, but also the stage where destinies were shaped. The listeners lean in, aware that every stone beneath their feet holds echoes of past judgments. A group of foreign travelers makes its way into the square, carrying with them unfamiliar scents and sounds. The aroma of spices escapes from their satchels, blending cinnamon and pepper into the crisp morning air. Their clothes, woven with brighter fabrics, catch the villagers' attention. The intimate detail of the children's curious stares expands outward. To them, these strangers are living stories walking before their eyes. Their presence is a reminder that the village is not isolated, but bound to wider roots. The innkeeper studies the travelers, already calculating how to draw them inside. His simple gesture of wiping his hands on his apron reveals anticipation. He knows that each visitor brings not only coins, but also news. In the Middle Ages, the movement of travelers was a vital source of information. The intimate view shows him as a merchant, but the wider view reveals his role as the village's link to the distant world. The weaver keeps spinning, yet her eyes linger on the colors of the fabrics the travelers carry. She recognizes dyes unknown in her village, likely from far-off lands. The thread slipping through her fingers takes on new meaning. What she spins here connects to the work of others in ports and distant cities. The widening turns her private gesture into part of an invisible network, stitching the world together. The troubadour greets the strangers with a cheerful chord. His music works both as welcome and translation. Without words, he communicates hospitality. The sound of the strings flows across the square, and some travelers return the greeting with smiles. The wider view reveals music's role as a universal language. In medieval villages, melody often united people across cultures. One of the merchants opens a pouch, releasing the strong scent of spices. The intimate detail lies in the reddish dust clinging to his fingers, which he wipes discreetly on his cloak. The wider effect spreads across the square. Many villagers had never smelled such powerful aromas and crowd closer, curious. The simple presence of these spices transforms the atmosphere, reminding everyone that the world is larger than the fields surrounding them. The innkeeper offers the travelers wine, and the clinking of mugs is accepted as a pact of trust. The sour taste might surprise the foreigners, but the gesture matters more than the drink itself. The wider view shows that sharing is a language of belonging. Each sip reinforces the idea that, for a few hours, all belong to the same story. The weaver studies the stranger's faces intently, a smile, a scar, a distant gaze. Each detail hints at stories she will never fully hear. Still, every expression forms part of a greater mosaic. The widening shows that even unfamiliar faces are threads in the fabric of collective life. Each one is a strand of color woven into the whole. Sensing the growing curiosity, the troubadour recounts how, in many great cities, marketplaces were even louder, filled with mingled tongues and endless cries of vendors. He describes Venice, where merchants brought glass and fine cloth, and Paris, where squares brimmed with students. His words expand the villagers' imagination. The world is not only this square, but a tangle of cities and voices echoing far beyond. The innkeeper, alert, understands that this widening serves him too. Every time someone speaks of distant lands, his tavern becomes more than shelter. It becomes a gathering place, a window onto the wider world. The intimate detail of him polishing a mug with a coarse rag ties into this larger vision. Even the simplest objects can host grander stories. Thus, daily routine joins the wider flow. The weaver sighs, realizing that each thread she spins might one day clothe someone in a land she will never see. The intimate detail of her craft expands into a dream. The fabric born from her hands is itself a traveler, even if she never leaves. The widening is this awareness, that even the humblest gestures can cross invisible borders and leave their mark on the world. A group of peasant women arrives in the square, balancing baskets of eggs, fresh cheese and vegetables. The intimate detail is the care with which they steady their loads on their heads, never breaking stride. The wider view reveals the larger picture. They carry not just goods, but the very life of the village, sustained by women's hands. Their murmured voices blend with the merchants' cries, weaving harmony out of labor. The troubadour watches and turns the scene into improvised verse. His song praises the courage of women who bear both the weight of baskets and of silence, holding families together. The intimate detail of his gentle voice expands into collective recognition. Everyone understands that in his lyrics, their own lives are being sung. Music enlarges reality, restoring dignity to gestures often overlooked. The innkeeper serves steaming soup to those who draw near. The smell of simmered vegetables spreads through the square, stirring hunger and turning heads. The intimate detail is the smoke spiraling upward, sketching shapes in the air. The wider view shows how even the simplest dish can become a gathering point, a symbol of warmth on a cold morning. Soup becomes more than food. It becomes communion. The weaver keeps spinning, now joined by other women who bring their spindles. The repetitive sound of fibers twisting forms a subtle melody, nearly invisible yet essential. Each spindle is an intimate detail, but together they become a collective performance. The wider view shows that when laboring hands unite, they form a silent chorus that sustains the world. A foreigner opens his satchel, revealing small metal objects, brooches, buckles, needles. The intimate detail lies in the way light glints off polished surfaces, making children's eyes shine. The wider view reveals something greater. These are goods from distant roots, proof that the village is connected to the larger world through trade. The simple act of opening a satchel broadens horizons. The troubadour seizes on the traveler's presence to tell stories of faraway lands. He speaks of deserts, seas crowded with ships, and walled cities larger than the entire region. The intimate detail is the brightness in his voice, enough to make even the most skeptical pause their work to listen. The wider view unfolds in imagination. Each listener is carried beyond the mountains, to places they may never see. The innkeeper offers wine to the travellers, and the clinking of mugs seals friendship. The intimate detail is the wine's sharp, acidic taste, surprising the foreigners, though they drink with respect. The wider view lies in the act itself. The entire village finds itself reflected in that ritual of hospitality, which carries more weight than coin. A shared toast can bind more firmly than a contract. The weaver studies the foreigner closely, noting the cut of his clothes. The intimate detail of the unfamiliar seams sparks new patterns in her mind. The widening happens instantly. What she sees may influence the cloth she weaves tomorrow. The intimate gaze finds a mirror in the other, and the collective gains from every quiet exchange of knowledge. Thus, destinies are woven together through fabric. The troubadour sings of distant markets, but interlaces his verses with local memories. The harvest festival, dances in the square, the church bell marking hours. The intimate detail of these familiar images warms the listeners. The wider view comes from the realization that the world is vast, yet still has space for their small villages. The far and the near merge into the same song. The innkeeper lifts his eyes toward the church bell as it begins to toll. The sound rolls across the square, deep and steady, vibrating in the chest. The intimate detail is that physical resonance, a reminder of shared time. The wider view reveals the bell as belonging not only to the church, but to the whole village, calling everyone into the same rhythm. Its sound unites different lives under one beat. A merchant lays down a stack of gleaming coins. The intimate detail is the metallic ring as they strike one another. The wider effect is immediate. Every chime is a promise of trade, of movement, of tomorrow. Money circulates, carrying with it stories, hopes, and needs. The square grows into a beating heart, pumping life into every corner. The weaver sighs, noticing that her thread looks finer in the morning light. The intimate detail of that thin line expands into metaphor. Every life is a thread, and together they form the fabric of the village. What once felt small is now seen as part of the whole. She understands that her story doesn't belong only to the tavern bench, but to the cloth of community itself. The troubadour ends his melody with a lingering chord. The intimate detail is the silence that follows, as thick as sound. The widening lies in its impact. For a moment, everyone stops to feel. The market resumes, but with gentler rhythm, as if the song has seeped into the heart of every gesture. The tune hasn't only described the world, it has reshaped it. The innkeeper fills another pot of soup, smiling at the crowded square. The intimate detail is the steam dampening his face, reminding him of the work needed to keep the fire alive. The wider view shows the importance of his role. To feed others is what keeps life possible. A simple act of serving becomes a symbol of collective sustenance. And so, traveler, the widening is complete. What began with close details now stretches across the entire village. The sounds, the scents, the gestures, the faces. You see that each life is a thread in a greater cloth, each voice part of an unseen choir. Hold on to this vision. The intimate and the collective are always intertwined, and the world is larger than we imagine. Yet there is still more to discover, for the story continues to grow. The square remains lively, yet inside the tavern a gentle stillness returns. The troubadour sets aside his lute, letting silence slowly fill the space. The intimate detail is the absence of sound, as eloquent as music itself. This pause is not an interruption, but an invitation to breathe. The contrast between the bustle outside and the calm within creates an atmosphere of retreat. The weaver rests her spindle on the floor and gazes at the loose fibers, as if each thread held a secret. The rough touch against her fingers blends with the soft warmth of the morning drifting through the half-open door. Around her, the silence amplifies the faint rhythm of her breath. This quiet contemplation turns the simple into the sacred, the thread, the wood, the pause. The innkeeper slowly wipes down one of the tables. His movement is so measured it feels like ritual. The scent of wood, steeped in wine and smoke, rises faintly as the damp cloth passes over it. The intimate detail of this repetition carries calm. The contemplative pause reveals that even cleaning can become a meditation. The troubadour notices the dog lying in the corner. The animal breathes deeply, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The detail is that cadence. Inhale, exhale, repeat. The tavern's silence seems to follow along, as if the whole room were breathing with him. Contemplation shows that even an animal's rest contains a lesson in serenity. The weaver closes her eyes for a moment and hears the soft crackle of the fire still burning in the hearth. Its warmth spreads in gentle waves, wrapping the body. The sweet, almost drowsy scent of burning wood lingers in the air. The detail of that faint sound expands into a feeling of shelter. In the pause, the fire becomes a friend, not just a source of heat. The innkeeper leans against the wall, letting his gaze wander to the narrow windows. The detail lies in the soft beams of light slipping in, illuminating tiny particles of dust suspended in the air. Their slow drift looks like a silent dance. Contemplation reveals hidden beauty in the ordinary. Even dust carries grace when seen with patience. The troubadour, still silent, runs his fingers across the lute strings without making them sing. The detail is the touch of skin against cool metal, reminding him of the fragility of songs. Contemplation shows that music doesn't always need sound. Sometimes silence holds the deepest melody. The weaver smooths the cloth across her lap, feeling the gentle weight of unfinished fabric. The intimate detail is its texture, the roughness slowly softening with her labor. She breathes deeply, letting calmness settle inside her. Contemplation reveals that time isn't measured only in hours, but in fibers spun and pauses honored. The innkeeper lights a candle, even though sunlight already spills into the room. The detail lies in the small flame, nearly unnecessary, yet adding warmth to the atmosphere. The faint scent of melting wax mingles with the smoke of the hearth. Contemplation shows that usefulness isn't the point. Lighting a flame is always an act of hope. The troubadour lifts his eyes and meets the weaver's. No words are spoken. The detail is in that silent exchange, saying more than speech could. They share the same pause, the same serenity. Contemplation reveals communion even in silence. The moment lingers, light as if time itself had set aside its march. The weaver opens her eyes again and notices the beam of light slipping through the crack in the door. Dust motes sparkle like stars in the middle of the morning. The intimate detail lies in this contrast. Daylight turned into a constellation inside the tavern. Contemplation shows that even light finds secret paths to enchant. The innkeeper breathes deeply, taking in the air laced with familiar scents. There's old wine, soup still warm, smoke from the hearth, and the faint sweetness of melted wax. The detail is that none of these aromas overwhelm the others. They coexist in balance. The pause reveals that even air can hold harmony. To inhale is also to remember, for each scent carries a memory. The troubadour runs his hand over his short beard, feeling the roughness of the bristles. The detail lies in the contrast between the coarse touch and the softness of the moment. This ordinary gesture becomes a bridge to the present. Contemplation teaches that even in silence the body speaks, and every sensation can open a door to calm. The weaver places her feet against the cold stone floor. The hardness beneath her contrasts with the warmth of the fire in front of her. The intimate detail is this difference that draws attention. Cold below, heat ahead, a perfect balance. The pause lingers because the body recognizes this dance of temperatures as comfort. The innkeeper takes a clean mug and fills it with water. The detail is the crystalline sound of the liquid striking the metal. He watches the reflection of light shimmer across its calm surface. Contemplation shows that even water, so ordinary, holds a mirror of the world. To drink slowly becomes almost a silent prayer. The troubadour lifts his gaze to the dark wooden ceiling, where tiny cracks let in thin rays of light. The detail is the dust sparkling in those beams, reminding him of nights spent in different taverns, yet always with the same essence: shelter. Contemplation teaches that places change, but meaning endures. The pause becomes a shared memory. The weaver gently caresses the spindle without spinning it. The detail is the silence of the wood, still yet full of potential. Contemplation reveals that rest is part of the work too. Spinning is not only movement, it's also pausing to feel the material and respect its time. The innkeeper watches the candle flame flicker softly. The intimate detail is the faint crackle of the burning wick, almost imperceptible. That fragility of light becomes a symbol of life, brief, delicate, yet resilient. Contemplation shows that even the smallest flame can illuminate when all else grows quiet. The troubadour closes his eyes and lets silence envelop him completely. The detail is the muffled sound of the square reaching through the wooden walls. He realizes how the tavern creates a cocoon between the world and the heart. Contemplation shows that retreat isn't escape, but refuge to renew one's strength. The weaver breathes in deeply and releases the air slowly, as if following the rhythm of the sleeping dog. The detail is the calm that spreads through her body, reaching even her weary shoulders. This conscious breath becomes a bridge to peace. Contemplation reveals that the simple act of being is already enough when the heart finds silence. The innkeeper rests the mug on the table and watches the candlelight flicker across the metal. The intimate detail lies in how the flame multiplies into tiny sparks, as if more than one light existed. Contemplation shows that even a reflection can feel abundant, reminding us the world holds more than what we see at first glance. The weaver runs her hand over the fabric, taking shape on her lap. Her touch reveals the difference between what's already spun, firm, and what still waits for the spindle, loose. The detail is this transition, mirroring life itself, part already woven, part still in the making. Contemplation teaches us to embrace both states as part of the same journey. The troubadour rests the lute on his lap and brushes the strings lightly with his thumb without pressing them down. The sound is little more than a sigh from the wood. The intimate detail lies in this faint vibration, blending with silence instead of breaking it. Contemplation shows that even the softest sound has its place, and not every song needs volume to reach the soul. The innkeeper looks toward the half-open door and sees the bustle of the square beyond. The detail is the distance. He can see the commotion, but feels only the tavern's calm. This boundary between inside and outside is a metaphor for life. Contemplation reveals that sometimes we need to stay close to the world, yet shielded from its excess. The weaver gathers the loose threads scattered on the table. The gesture is small, but the detail lies in the order it brings to the space. Contemplation shows that tidying up is its own kind of meditation. Placing each thread in its place is like aligning thoughts, preparing the spirit to go on. The troubadour props his chin on his hand and gazes at the fire in the hearth. The intimate detail is the ember still glowing hidden under ash. Contemplation shows that even what seems extinguished can hold quiet life. It becomes a metaphor for the human heart. The flame may weaken, but it never fully dies. The innkeeper closes his eyes for a moment just to listen. The detail is that silence is never complete. There's the crackle of the wood, the rustle of the weaver's clothing, the dog's steady breathing. Contemplation shows that stillness is woven from tiny sounds that together create a melody of rest. The weaver lifts her eyes to the ceiling and follows the slow path of a spider moving along its thread. The intimate detail lies in the insect's patience, building its web inch by inch. Contemplation reveals that even the smallest creatures carry wisdom. Waiting and persistence are invisible strength. The troubadour opens the parchment, not to reveal secrets, but simply to admire the lines drawn across it. The detail is the beauty of the design itself, regardless of what it represents. Contemplation shows that not every map is meant to guide. Some exist to be admired as quiet works of art. The innkeeper breathes deeply and exhales slowly, feeling his body ease. The intimate detail is the weight lifting from his shoulders, as if invisible burdens had been set down. Contemplation teaches that even the busiest deserve pause, and silence can be a balm for the weariness unseen by others. The weaver leans her head against the wooden wall, feeling the rough texture against her hair. The intimate detail lies in the contrast between the wood's rigidity and the softness of her skin. Contemplation reveals that even the hardest surfaces can offer support when one seeks rest. The innkeeper gathers a few empty bowls and stacks them slowly. The faint sound of pottery touching creates a quiet cadence in the silence. The detail rests in this measured rhythm, resembling a calm melody. Contemplation shows that even repetitive work can hold the possibility of peace. The troubadour runs his fingers over the closed parchment as though caressing a secret. The intimate detail is the chill of the leather beneath his hand. Contemplation teaches that one doesn't need to open something to sense it. Mystery can be cherished even when kept sealed. The weaver watches the candle's flame, now smaller. The detail is the drop of wax sliding slowly, layering itself over and over. Contemplation shows that even in melting there is beauty, and nothing is lost. Each form simply becomes another. The innkeeper sighs, recalling mornings like this from years gone by. The intimate detail is memory blending with the present. Contemplation reveals that time isn't a straight line, but a circle. What has passed returns in quiet echoes. The troubadour lifts his eyes and notices the dust still dancing in the light. The detail is how each tiny particle seems to have a life of its own. Contemplation shows that even the invisible can enchant when seen with patience. The weaver picks up the spindle but doesn't spin it. She only holds it, feeling its light weight in her hand. The intimate detail is the patience required, accepting that not every moment is for movement. Contemplation teaches that rest is also part of the work. The innkeeper rests his chin in his palm, letting his body relax. The detail is the heaviness of his arms sinking onto the table. Contemplation shows that pausing is also trust, believing the world will go on without our constant rush. The troubadour closes his eyes and listens to the soft crackle of the hearth. The intimate detail is the sound that resembles distant footsteps. Contemplation transforms the fire into a metaphor, a presence that warms and guides even in silence. The weaver feels the breeze slipping in through the door. The detail is the chill brushing gently against her skin, reminding her that the world continues beyond the tavern walls. Contemplation shows that even the wind carries subtle messages. The innkeeper rises and places another log on the fire. The intimate detail is the sharp crack as wood meets ember. Contemplation reveals that constant care keeps the flame alive, just as life requires steady attention. The troubadour opens his eyes and takes in the calm around him. The detail is the balance between sound and silence, light and shadow, motion and stillness. Contemplation shows that existence itself rests upon contrasts. The weaver resumes spinning, but at a slow, almost meditative pace. The intimate detail is the thread forming gently, as if keeping time with her breath. Contemplation teaches that work, too, can become prayer. The innkeeper smiles faintly, recognizing the value of shared silence. The detail is the feeling of belonging, everyone united without words. Contemplation shows that community is built not only with voices, but also with pauses. And so, traveler, the contemplative pause comes to its close. The tavern rests in serenity, as if it had breathed alongside each of its patrons. Hold on to this image: silence as companion, calm as teacher. For even in the heart of medieval life, surrounded by voices and battles, there was always room for moments of stillness. The journey continues, carrying the peace of this instant. The sun now climbs higher, and from the outside the tavern appears as a discreet gathering place at the heart of the square. The gaze shifts away from the tables inside and lingers on the building itself. Dark wooden walls, heavy oak doors, and narrow windows that resemble slits in a fortress wall. The intimate detail lies in its simple design, but this new perspective highlights its strength, a shelter that endures steadfast against time. A barefoot boy runs past the door, balancing a stick with a piece of cloth tied at the end. The detail is his light laughter, so different from the deeper voices of the adults. From this new perspective, we see the village through a child's eyes, where even the tavern becomes a stage for adventure. What some see as rest, others imagine as a castle. The dog that had been resting inside wanders out to the street, sniffing at the damp ground. The intimate detail is his alert nose, always searching for traces unseen. This new perspective shows the animal as a silent guardian, attuned to what escapes human sight. His sense of smell becomes a bridge between hidden and visible worlds. The innkeeper appears at the threshold, calmly watching the square. The detail lies in the shadow he casts across the stone ground, long and steady. From this new perspective, he is no longer just the one who serves drinks, but a figure of reference, almost a living landmark of the village. His presence suggests stability amid the bustle. The weaver continues spinning on the bench by the door, now seen by passers-by as part of the scene itself. The intimate detail is the thread slipping steadily through her fingers. This new perspective reveals her work as more than invisible labor. It becomes a symbol of life's continuity, openly woven before the eyes of all. The troubadour, seated near the entrance, watches the world with the eyes of a chronicler. The detail is the way his fingers rest upon the lute, ready to turn every moment into song. From this perspective, he is not merely a musician, but an interpreter of daily life, capturing voices, scents, and gestures to preserve them in memory. A peasant woman walks by with a jug of water balanced on her head. The intimate detail is the firmness of her posture, straight as a tree trunk. This new perspective reveals the quiet strength of medieval women, who carried not only water, but the weight of entire households. The jug is more than a vessel. It is a symbol of endurance. A group of youths gathers around a merchant's stall. The detail is the spark in their eyes as they touch colorful fabrics they've never seen before. From this perspective, we notice how the longing for novelty stirred hearts even in the smallest villages. The feel of cloth awakens dreams larger than the square itself. The distant church bell tolls again, but now, from outside the tavern, the detail is the echo that rolls across the entire square. The sound travels over rooftops, weaving itself into the voices of merchants. From this new perspective, the bell is not only a call to prayer, but the heartbeat stitching together the village's rhythm. The boy who had been running returns and stops at the tavern door, breathless. The intimate detail is the sweat glistening on his forehead, a reflection of childhood's boundless energy. From this perspective, we see that even the children's rush is part of the larger fabric of life, reminding us that the present is not only made of responsibilities, but also of play that keeps the spirit light. An old man walks slowly past the tavern, leaning on a worn staff. The intimate detail is the dry sound of wood striking stone with every step. From this new perspective, the village is also made of slow steps, of living memories moving through the present. He carries with him the story of many winters, reminding everyone that time is measured not only in hours, but in journeys. The weaver watches the elder and smiles, recognizing in him the same patience her craft demands. The intimate detail is the way he lifts his eyes to the sky at each pause, as if seeking strength beyond the earth. From this perspective, even the simplest gesture becomes a bridge between the human and the eternal. The innkeeper turns inside and fills a mug of water to offer the old man. The detail lies in the humility of the act, so small it could be overlooked. This perspective shows that hospitality doesn't reside only in banquets, but in quiet, everyday gestures that sustain communal life. A foreign merchant opens his bag, revealing objects of colored glass. The intimate detail is the way the light catches, transforming each piece into a glittering spark. From this perspective, novelties brought from afar could seem magical, almost otherworldly, to eyes accustomed only to wood and iron. The troubadour studies the villagers' reactions, storing each expression in memory. The intimate detail is the curiosity reflected in eyes tired from routine. From this perspective, the value lies not only in the object itself, but in the brief light it awakens in the hearts of those who behold it. A group of children gathers, fascinated by the glass. The detail is their daring fingers reaching out despite warnings. From this perspective, childhood always seeks to touch the forbidden, and in that touch lie the first dreams of change. The weaver watches the children and remembers her own youth, when she was spellbound by the rare colors brought by travelers. The intimate detail is the memory of that wonder. From this perspective, she realizes her life, though woven in repetition, was also born from the fascination once carried in from the outside world. The innkeeper offers fresh bread to the foreigners, a simple yet meaningful act. The detail is the warm scent of rye, freshly baked, drifting through the square. From this perspective, sharing food is more than nourishment. It's a bridge between different worlds, capable of uniting strangers in trust. The troubadour, inspired by the moment, strums a short melody about unexpected meetings. The intimate detail is the lightness of the notes, as if the music itself was smiling with the people. From this perspective, music doesn't just describe the world, it recreates it, enlarging each fleeting instant. A peasant arrives leading a donkey, laden with bundles of straw. The intimate detail is the dry, steady rhythm of the animal's steps. From this perspective, even animals are essential to the village. Without them, the burden of life would be unbearable. The donkey, silent, carries more than straw. It carries the survival of all. The weaver lifts her gaze to the donkey, following the slow sway of its head. The intimate detail is the animal's patience, never protesting the weight it bears. From this new perspective, she understands that even the silence of beasts speaks of endurance. The village isn't made only of human voices, but also of the quiet strength that sustains invisible labor. The innkeeper strokes the donkey's muzzle before the peasant continues on. The intimate detail is the warmth of that touch, rough yet steady. From this perspective, even in dealing with animals, there's affection and recognition. Life itself is a pact of interdependence. The troubadour watches the scene and improvises short verses about the loyalty of animals. The intimate detail is the simplicity of the rhyme, enough to draw smiles from the villagers. From this perspective, every small song reshapes reality, reminding them that poetry doesn't need a stage, it's born in every observed gesture. A group of young people approaches the tavern, carrying with them the strong smell of sweat and straw. The intimate detail is the restless energy in their eyes, sharp and vibrant. From this perspective, youth is what keeps the village moving forward, pushing it ahead, even when tradition seems to hold it back. The weaver feels a cold breeze sweep across the square. The intimate detail is the shiver running down her arms, reminding her that autumn is near. From this perspective, every season shapes the community's life, not just the fields. Even inside the tavern, the wind is a herald of change. The innkeeper steps back into the hall and looks at the table closest to the hearth. The intimate detail is the wood, worn by years of use, etched with scratches and stains. From this perspective, each mark is a record of history, hands resting, cups raised in toast, tears spilled. The tavern is also a book, written in silence. The troubadour opens his lute and strums low chords, barely audible. The intimate detail is the vibration running through the wood of the bench into his legs. From this perspective, music isn't only sound, but a sensation moving through the body, linking inner and outer worlds. A foreign merchant, seated in the shade of a tree, observes the scene in silence. The intimate detail is his attentive gaze, measuring each face and gesture. From this perspective, the village is also seen through the eyes of newcomers, a mosaic of curiosities, mysteries, and opportunities. The weaver feels that gaze upon her and wonders what he sees. The intimate detail is her doubt. Does he see her as a simple artisan or as part of a world unknown to him? From this perspective, she realizes that each of us is a different story, depending on the eyes that behold us. The innkeeper returns to the doorway and looks out at the square once more. The intimate detail is the contrast between shadow and light, the coolness within, the brightness without. From this perspective, that contrast becomes a symbol of constant choice, between retreat and exposure, between silence and the movement of life. The troubadour lifts his eyes to the open sky above the square. The intimate detail is the bluish hue, streaked with clouds drifting slowly. From this new perspective, the day is not just a backdrop, but a silent narrator, setting the village's rhythm with its light and its shadows. And so, traveler, we conclude this outward gaze, this new perspective. May you hold the image of the village in motion, the tavern as a pulsing heart, and the voices interwoven. For the story is not only within the walls, but also in the world beyond them. And there is still more to discover, if you walk on with me. Silence settles inside the tavern, yet something new stirs. The senses awaken with intensity, as if every detail longs to be noticed. The troubadour breathes deeply, catching the scent of soup, wood smoke, wax, and even the leather of the parchment. The intimate detail is this blend of aromas, once subtle, now perceived as an invisible melody. To heighten the senses is to see what was always there. The innkeeper lights another candle and watches the flame dance atop the wick. The flickering light casts shifting shadows across the walls, turning the room into a theater of fleeting images. To heighten the senses is to notice that even shadows speak, shaping forms that exist only for moments before vanishing. He feels the gentle warmth of the flame on his face, breathes in the sweet scent of burning wax. The candle, so small, becomes its own sun, ruling the atmosphere with its fragile glow. The weaver leans closer to the hearth and stretches out her hands. Heat washes over her skin in waves, alternating between intensity and comfort. She notices how the sensation changes as she moves her fingers nearer or farther. It feels almost like a silent dialogue with the fire. To heighten the senses is to play with the boundaries of touch, to learn where comfort ends and pain begins. The scent of burning wood mingles with the dry crackle of sparks, creating an invisible symphony that warms both body and spirit. The troubadour rests his forehead in his palm and hears his own sigh escape. The sound is low, yet full of meaning, weariness, relief, surrender. To heighten the senses is to notice that even breathing can be music. He follows the rhythm of inhale and exhale as one follows a secret beat. His whole body aligns with the steady flow, reminding him that living at its core is to breathe. The quiet around him makes the sigh sharper, as though it were a whispered confession to the world. The innkeeper touches the rim of a freshly washed bowl, feeling the cool smoothness of the ceramic. The contrast between the lingering dampness and the firmness of the material makes him smile. To heighten the senses is to see that even in objects, beauty hides. He notices the regularity of the shape, the shine of the surface, the soft sound as he sets it on the table. Each bowl carries the mark of hands that shaped it, of fire that hardened it, of clay that was once earth before it became vessel. Thus, even the simplest object reveals its greatness under a careful gaze. The troubadour rests his lute on the table and watches how the polished wood reflects the candle's flame. The detail lies in the glossy surface, capturing the glow in golden curves. To heighten the senses is to notice that music doesn't live only in the strings, but also in the silent beauty of the instrument itself. Every mark, every scratch holds stories of nights when sound cradled weary voices. The weaver spins her spindle more slowly, and the once hurried sound of the fibers turns into a calm cadence, like the footsteps of someone savoring the path. She feels the thread slip more gently between her fingers, revealing textures that haste would have hidden. The touch shows her the difference between rough fibers and those already well twisted, firm and smooth. Each turn seems to carry more weight, not from effort, but from the awareness that work doesn't need to rush. The slow variation becomes an invitation to dive into detail, to turn a repeated gesture into meditation. The innkeeper lifts the pot from the fire and sets it carefully on a thick wooden board, watching the steam rise in waves that weaken little by little. The smell of soup, once sharp, drifts into the air like a lingering memory, blending dried herbs, vegetables, and the charred wood of the hearth. He leans closer and feels the softness of the vapor brush his face, leaving his skin warm and damp. The detail lies in the transformation. What was strength is now gentleness, as if even food were following the day's change. The slow variation shows itself not only in sounds and gestures, but in aromas that fade until they become almost a silent song. The troubadour props his lute against the wall and steps to the tavern door. He watches the square under full daylight, where people still move, but no longer in a rush. A merchant who once called out loudly now speaks in a low tone. Children who ran shouting now walk quietly with trinkets in their hands. Even the animals seem to follow a calmer rhythm. The scene is one of continuity, but without urgency. This slow variation can be heard in sound as well. Coins clink with longer pauses, wagon wheels turn without haste. It's as if time itself had cleared a path for each person to notice details that would otherwise vanish in the morning's swirl. The weaver smooths the freshly spun thread, watching how the wool yields softly to her touch. She notices small irregularities, but instead of rushing to fix them, she accepts them as part of the fabric. Pausing to admire each flaw makes her smile, for she understands life, too, is built from imperfections that shape its beauty. The spindle's quiet hum follows her thoughts like a private song. The slow variation lets her see the thread not as a product, but as a story unfolding curve by curve. The innkeeper adjusts the benches, sliding them across the stone floor with steady movements. The deep sound reverberates through the room like a distant drumbeat, filling the air without hurry. He feels the wood resisting the stone, not as friction to be fought, but as rhythm joining the day. The satisfaction he finds in this simple act surprises him. The slow variation shows him even arranging a room can bring pleasure when done with patience. Each bench set in place is like a note added to a song still forming. The troubadour closes his eyes again and focuses on the scents around him. The soup's fading aroma, the smoke of the hearth, the faint sweetness of spilled honey on the table, all merge into a single perfume. He breathes deeply and lets his sense of smell guide him through memory. Each fragrance carries him to different times, the road, the fields, nights under stars. The slow variation reminds him the senses hold living memories, ready to awaken when given room. Each breath becomes a secret journey. The innkeeper exhales deeply, placing both hands on the counter and pressing into the sturdy wood. The mingled scents of dampness and wax stir memories of old mornings when he first opened the hall. A smile touches his lips as he realizes every ending is also a disguised beginning. Gentle closure is born in this recognition. There are no absolute endings, only cycles repeating. The night hides promises beneath its quiet cloak. The minstrel closes his eyes and lets the night wind slip through the cracks of the window. The gentle cold brushes his skin, not as a threat, but as a reminder that the world is still alive outside. The sound of crickets blends with the whisper of the air, forming a hidden melody. The gentle closure lies in this recognition. Even silence has its orchestra, and every invisible note cradles like an ancient song. He sighs, surrendering to the rhythm of the night. The innkeeper looks out the window and sees the street plunged into almost complete darkness. Only a distant lantern draws circles of light on the uneven ground. The air carries the smell of cold earth, a sign that the night already reigns. The gentle closure is expressed in this calm landscape. Nothing abrupt, only the cycle closing. He breathes deeply and lets serenity envelop him. The minstrel intertwines his fingers and rests his chin upon them, closing his eyes slowly. Hearing the breathing of his companions, he notices that all have already surrendered to silence in different ways. The gentle closure lies in this invisible communion. No words are needed to share the moment. The body rests simply by existing there, wrapped in peace that covers like a veil. The weaver slides her fingers across the empty bench beside her and feels the wood's roughness. The gesture confirms there is no hurry, only silent company. The gentle closure is in this realization. Even empty spaces have value, for they hold room for rest. She smiles, understanding that emptiness is not absence, but a promise of welcome. The innkeeper snuffs out another candle and watches the darkness expand within the room. Smoke rises in a thin line, exhaling the sweet scent of wax. He follows the movement until it disappears into the air, dissolving slowly. The gentle closure lies in this slow extinguishing, which does not startle but soothes. The light bids farewell like a friend, yielding space to the welcoming dusk. The minstrel opens his eyes and faces the penumbra now in command. He feels that darkness is not the absence of life, but a quieter presence. The gentle closure lies in this acceptance. The night is not an enemy, but a companion. His heart rests, his mind calms in recognizing that every cycle has its time. He breathes deeply, ready to let sleep carry him away. The weaver folds her arms across her chest and settles into the chair, letting her eyes close for a moment. The sounds of the night drift in like a lullaby, cradling each breath. The gentle closure lies in this slow surrender, where the body asks for nothing more than rest. She smiles faintly, as if thanking the day for the lessons it left behind. The innkeeper gathers the cleaning cloth and folds it neatly, putting it away as if to seal the work complete. The gesture is simple, but carries the weight of finality. He runs his fingers across the fabric, feeling the dampness that lingers, a reminder of recent effort. The gentle closure is in this detail, accepting that everything has its time to end. Peace is born when there's no more hurry. The minstrel rests his hand on the lute lying still and looks at it like an old friend. The silence of the instrument doesn't bring sorrow, but comfort. He knows the music remains alive even without sound. The gentle closure speaks through this trust. Not everything must be heard to exist. He breathes deeply, embracing the quiet presence of melody resting within him. The weaver gazes at the hearth, nearly extinguished, where embers flicker like the eyes of a drowsy creature. The warmth still reaches her face in soft waves, reminding her that even in endings, strength remains. The gentle closure is in this calm persistence, warmth without clamor. She feels the small flame is enough to accompany the night until sleep arrives. The innkeeper leans once more on the counter, surveying the tidy hall. Clean tables, aligned chairs, extinguished candles, everything rests in order. The gentle closure lies in beholding this harmony and feeling part of it. He breathes deeply, as if engraving the image in memory, and lets silence fill the space. The minstrel closes his eyes and tilts his head, hearing only the slow rhythm of his own breathing. He allows himself to be carried by this simple, steady cadence. The gentle closure is in this acceptance. The body knows when it's time to rest. He smiles quietly, grateful for the moment. The weaver takes the basket of gathered thread and sets it against the wall, as though placing down a treasure. Her gesture carries tenderness and a quiet promise. The gentle closure reveals itself in the awareness that every labor finds rest before beginning anew. She runs her hand across the basket's wooden frame and feels at peace. The innkeeper blows out the last candle and watches as darkness embraces the room entirely. A thin line of smoke rises, leaving a sweet trace in the air. The gentle closure is in this extinguishing that comforts instead of startles. The shadows turn the hall into a silent refuge. He smiles, knowing the night has finally taken its place. The minstrel opens his eyes one last time and looks around at the room now immersed in shadow. He feels there's nothing left to say, only to live the silence. The gentle closure is realizing that the end is also a song, even without notes. His heart finds rest in the quiet dark. And so, traveler, the journey comes to an end. The tavern rests, the thread is gathered, the music quiets, the fire drifts into sleep. Yet nothing is gone. Everything transforms into memory. The gentle closure is an invitation for you too to rest, surrendering to sleep as if stepping through a doorway into a new day. Until tomorrow, I'll be waiting to journey again with you, through forgotten ages, through moments of quiet courage and unexpected humanity. You already know where to find me. Here, between history and dream. Sleep well, traveler. May peace be with you.